Alex Jones, and I'm here to tell you folks, the world has fallen. The fascist globalist overlords, they're implementing the Great Reset. You don't believe me? I've seen the tapes. Watch it, folks. Watch as these pot-bellied Zoomer goblins work with the Illuminati to pit us against each other. I promise I'd be a good boy.
I'm a good boy.
There's only one cure, folks, and that's liberty. And there's no better channel to find freedom than Fabian Liberty. Anarchy is order. Government is civil war.
I just got three things to say. God bless our troops. God bless America. And gentlemen, start your engine!
I got you, sir. Let me get my shoes. Hold on, you're ready. So we gotta move to the front.
Not only do you have a micro penis, which is an important point, but on top of that, you refuse to share your Pokemon cards, and that's not nice.
So first of all, a 2-inch penis is not a micro penis, okay? And for your second point, my Pokemon cards are all mine, and I don't have to share them if I don't want them. I work super hard to get them, and they're really special to me. So I'll keep them.
You don't understand. You can't continue to play with us if you refuse to share your
Not fair.
cards.
I'm Ukrainian, and this is my bridge. I'm Ukrainian, and this is my gas station. I'm Ukrainian, and this is my school.
2 seconds earlier.
Would you let a Jew work out in your gym without paying if he claimed that the membership was promised to him by God 4,000 years ago?
Bro, you are fucking...
That's a good question.
Yo, you're fucking funny. No, I mean, everyone pays.
What if he tried bombing you for that?
Bro, I mean, that would be like some crazy crime. Some acted, I don't even know, there, I don't know.
Are you taking a political stance right now?
Just found in my house. And that's called a bird grasshopper. I'm gonna eat him.
He's not been transparent. I mean, there may be...
They are making routine announcements about the things they are finding, and they are inviting questions about the things they are finding every single day.
But by definition, he's not being transparent. They're not providing data for the things that they say they have found evidence of. They just aren't.
The White House has provided...
You can make announcements, and he also did admit that he actually...
So you just don't believe it. I mean, they are providing information. You just choose not to believe that it's true.
We're seeing about 13 months for these brain and spine MRIs. Cool. Canada, where healthcare is free, but only if you can afford to wait.
Step 10, states must publish their own map and allow internal challenges to their own map. So the government has published a map. They have invited the states to challenge the map. Then states have submitted initial proposals, and they then have to publish their own map and allow challenges.
Wait, who's challenging it within the state?
Well, organized interest groups, environmental groups, like I don't know who specifically, but literally anybody. This is, right. I want to say something because it's very important I say this. This is the Biden administration's process for its own bill. They wanted this to happen. This is how liberal government works now.
This is something they instituted for this bill.
For their bill. This is a bill passed by Democrats with a regulatory structure written by Democratic administration. Okay.
Right.
Step 11.
Ideological subversion is the slow process which we call either ideological subversion or active measures, активные мероприятия in the language of the KGB, or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country.
For our most tricky disagreements, seeking the truth and seeking to convince others of the truth might not be the right place to start. In fact, our reverence for the truth might be a distraction that's getting in the way of finding common ground and getting things done.
free fries when you get vaccinated? I got vaccinated. You're saying I could get this? These delicious fries? Wait a minute. But there's also a burger element to this? Let me check with Bill Neathart. Is it too early in the day to eat a burger? No. This could be breakfast? Okay. I want you to look at this and think about, again, some people love hamburgers, some don't. Really want to respect all ways of life. But if this is appealing to you, just think of this when you think of vaccination. Vaccination. I'm getting a very good feeling about vaccination right this moment. Thank you.
When I win, I will immediately bring prices down starting on day one.
Men to woman, or woman to men.
Man to woman.
From penis to vagina.
In the shower, on a walk, the Dylan hour. Feeling sweet, feeling sour. I feel nothing. The Dylan hour.
Hello and welcome to Wales. We understand being a refugee isn't easy. They go through so much. Fleeing your country is difficult, but Wales wants to help you feel welcome. The Welsh Refugee Council is here to help you.
Tell me you love me. Say it like you mean it. Say it like you mean it. You message one other guy ever again whether we're together or not. You understand me?
But if you're a man who's stuck with a woman and you don't even get along with each other and it's a show marriage and you have to be together and you argue all the time and you're sexually repressed and you're being promised in secret that you can go to an island and finally be pleasured and satisfied, no one's ever going to find out, that's how you end up on the island. So this whole monogamy garbage that's being pushed by the West, especially amongst our elites, is the reason we have the biggest problem with pedophilia, and they don't have this problem in South America.
The whole point of this is for me to begin to reintroduce myself. I'm doing this both personally for me, but in a professional capacity. Moving forward, the majority of what you will see will be me speaking in a professional capacity. My goal is to continue to help give a voice.
Arguing with them, hey guys, if no one pays taxes, then who's going to stop the fires? Who's going to stop all the violent crime? Dummies. And then the LA fire happened, and the fire department didn't stop the fire because I guess they ran out of budget for water, and the police didn't stop the looting because I guess they didn't want to get near the fire, and so I guess I lost that argument. My bad.
I forgot to start the music. There we go. Now it doesn't sound so empty. So much better. What is up, guys? Dude, I love that I put in that video that I'm sure almost everyone hates, which is Andrew Tate beating an underage girl. I just love that that's part of my intro because I just love blackpilling everybody on that. I fucking hate Andrew Tate so much. Don't like fucking pedophiles as a father that like to sex trap. Well, I guess technically he's an ephebophile, bro. It's or a hebephile or whatever, whichever one is the mostly post-pubescent one, whatever. But fuck, I just love being like, no. All of you will hate him with me. I love putting that in there. Fuck Andrew Tate. Hit me again with it, Scott. Oh, but my emergency services, my police, my firemen. Was that Andrew? That was Andrew Tate saying that the only reason we have pedophilia in the West is because we have this weird thing where we're married to like a man and a woman being married in monogamy, and that like if rich dudes were just allowed to go to the club and fuck bitches and cheat on their wife, then of course they wouldn't fuck kids on islands. No, I did not, Frederick. Oh, dude, I love that video at the end. Bummies. I lost that one. I'm sorry. Yeah, he's also acting like, exactly, Mark, acting like pedophilia isn't a problem in Muslim countries is a wild thing to say. Have I read about Georgism? Yeah, it's just socialism, but stupider. But taxes are okay because we tax the land. What if I put a crypto mining thing on my land? Oh, but we can figure out based off of what you do on the land, the value of the land. Because the land changes value based off of what you're doing on the land. Oh, so like a VAT tax that you just claim is about the land? Oh, okay. So socialism, but with extra steps to make it seem like it's cool. Georgism's fucking stupid. What if I take Georgism, but like private property was like I was the owner, get payments from land use? So like rent. Yeah, mutualism is like soft socialism, or that is a masquerading as something else, or it's like old school anarcho-mutualists that are big fans of Proudhon and are just like way behind the times, but they read, you know, Property is Theft and they were like, great book. This is my idea forever. I will never update this. I need no more information about economics or land or philosophy in any way, shape, or form. What an amazing book. And it's like, they're kind of cool to argue with because they're honest, you know, and they're weird, but they're not. It's not anything I support. And the entire concept of like personal property is really just kind of dumb. Even Kropotkin talks about how personal property is stupid, and then like, no, we mean all property. I mean, trading and separation of labor is pretty mutualist. Yeah, but they don't believe in private property. They only believe in like personal property. You got it, Silver Ogre. Like, mutualist is where that like personal versus private property thing stemmed from. And it's funny because like I said, Kropotkin is even like, no, we mean all property. It's like, hey man, you don't understand. We were using this as a shield so that we could push our ideas onto unsuspecting people and then slowly black pill them. Don't tell the truth. Yeah, Mark has it. Sorry, Mark. To the gulag, to the mines with you. Sorry. You're going to the mines. Because of the fact that we no longer use filtration systems in the mines, everyone's hair falls out. And due to your disease and the fact that you already have that, we have determined collectively that you shall work in the mines or we'll kill you. I don't understand the justification of allowing people to own land in perpetuity. Why is that good? You're effectively creating government. What? You're not creating government by saying that people are allowed to pass on their property whenever they, to whomever they wish. You'd need a government to get rid of that. No, I know some of it's meeting when you talk about AI and F people losing their jobs, but I think it's fine to want progress via AI, but still worry about those people. Or just not want AI in my business. Yeah, I mean, you can if you want. What are you sending me? Has to be quick because I'm getting in this debate here.
Hey, Jeffrey Peter.
Okay. What's happening? Hold on.
Hey, Jeffrey Peter Griffin has a mustache. No way. Way. Oh no.
What is happening? What is happening? It's so weird. Oh no. That's fair. I want you all to know that I did not download LibreOffice, that I typed my intro in my notes on OpenOffice, that I did not bend to the will of the mob. Mostly because I just didn't feel like downloading a new thing when I had stuff to do. I'll probably do it this weekend and check it out. But I did not bow to the mob, okay? I stayed using my outdated program. Yeah, people don't realize Jimbob is not like the smartest person on earth, but he's an incredibly good debater. I have a lot of respect for Jimbob as a debater. And that's the thing, is that like people don't recognize that there's a difference between like the art and the charisma involved in debating versus the strength of someone's arguments and the ability of their mind to grasp, difficult concepts. Jimbob's a great debater. Like, I don't know why people, I do know why, but like I have like, it's a pet peeve of mine when people are like, oh, they're a communist, then they're dumb. And it's like, no, there's plenty of smart communists, just like there are smart fucking people in every group. And just because their ideas are wrong doesn't mean they're dumb. And using canned arguments and that sound good and are really succinct work, right? Like it works. Like when you say some shit that just goes, oh, well, that's just a preference. And then the other person has to nerd out and break down what you said. And the most of the audience doesn't understand the breakdown that you gave, but you had like a pithy remark. That shit works for a lot of people. You just have to, you got to understand the audience, So, it is what it is. Did I have anything saved? I do have some stuff saved, but save that for another night. You gotta be pretty bright to hold up and reason your way around nonstop contradictions. Yeah, true. Jimbob has a good sense of humor and an organized mind, so he will be a tough opponent. Yeah, that's how I feel about it. The new Toronto accent, did you send it to me? You didn't send it to me. I guess because I said I had seen it. But I didn't save it. Scott, do you like eating ribs? Have you ever had bourbon whiskey ribs? Yeah, I'm a fat guy that lives in America. Of course I've had bourbon whiskey ribs. They're delicious. Like what? What are you saying? Hey, fat American, have you ever had French fries? They're pretty good. You should check them out. Come on, man. What are you doing to me? Think I haven't sampled classic fat boy cuisine?
Oh, why it's so crazy to be honest.
Oh, this is a different one. This isn't the one that I saw. It is the same chick, though. This is the new accents, all right? Black people have made it all the way to fucking rural Canada, and we have new accents from the blacks. Thank you, black people.
To be honest, but then, like, I started watching, like, SNL Drake, and I'm like, oh, man. Like, Drake, buddy, you emphasized it a bit. Love you, but... And then I'm like, oh, man, this is why
so
people...
bad.
When I meet people, like, influencers, they're not even from the dot. It's all fake. And then I'm like, yo... It's because people think it's so fake, but they're not from the grungy. They don't know man's like come out. They actually talk like that. There's certain slang. Slang has came and went over the years.
Yeah, going back to that, you said Drake was kind of faking his accent.
Well, Drake...
You think he has an accent, he kind of exaggerated it, or do you think he was faking it?
No, I don't think it was faked. I think the SNL made him exaggerate it a little bit.
Yeah.
Same way as they do Pete Davidson. Like, not with the accent, but they make Pete Davidson sometimes look so goofy. And I'm like, sir, why'd you agree to this?
What? I didn't know that this bad accent would also come in with I want to fuck Pete Davidson cope. That's the blackest thing about her. You know what I mean? Like, for real. Like, is that she wants Pete Davidson. Yeah, dude. They got Blight Blazer needs to apologize for his people, all right? For going into Canada and giving us a new cursed accent. All right, I would appreciate it if you apologize now. Blight Blazer, no. You need to apologize. I ain't apologizing for shit. You don't believe in collective punishment? Good libertarian. I watched his debate prep today. It was more just hyping his crowd, probably. I mean, I logged in to see if he was actually talking about his arguments out of curiosity, and he wasn't. And I was like, okay, this is just dumb. I'm sure he prepped. But you'll see. I'm sure there'll be a lot of like attacking his conception of libertarianism, and like trying to bog the thing down into ethics and not actually talk about, you know, the topic. So it'll be interesting. It'll be a lot. It should be a lot of fun. You're north of me, but not that north? No, I was just meant collectively apologize because you're black. I didn't mean, I meant something different. Oh, shit. Okay, I have too many tabs open. Oh, shit. Hold on 1 second. Forgot to cut off my camera. About to hop in there, boys. All right, I'm in here. I'm 7 minutes early. I feel like this is when you're supposed to be here, though. I'm not a big fan of the. I wish that I could show you guys my camera instead of it being like this little thing over here. When, like when I'm in a waiting room or something. Like that is an option that I wish Streamlabs had. Because it's really fucking annoying to be like early, like you should be. You know what I mean? Like, oh, there's a comment section. He must be doing the stream like literally through Streamlabs. Right. Well, it's like exactly because like they don't give you the option when you're backstage to just like blow up your own camera. And like for 90% of people, I guess that probably doesn't matter. But if you're a streamer and you show up to like a debate or something and someone's using Streamlabs and you do like you're supposed to, which is, you know, I guess I have my small version of PTSD from the army is that I have to be early to make sure mic and sound check and all that shit is good. But if you show up early, like you're just sitting here with this little baby, oink, 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 this little baby thing in the corner of the screen. Silver Ogre over here repeating jokes. I see you. What about us having a lot of Jews? You talking about the fact that ANCAPs have a lot of Jews? Libertarian monarchy is the best system. Chairman of the board, you might be the only person that's really, really going to enjoy my opening statement. That's all I got to say. I'm pretty sure you're going to be the only one. Oh, here we go.
Gentlemen, can you hear me?
I can indeed hear you.
Yes, sir.
Fantastic. How are we both today?
Pretty good. How are you guys doing?
Good.
Doing well.
Good. Are you guys live streaming?
Yeah, I'm always live.
Fantastic. Sounds good. So I think we're all pretty clear on the format of the debate, which is 5 minutes each opening statements, and then I'm going to kick it into opening dialogue after that, after we listen to Bruce Buffer announce the fight. So yeah, you guys have any questions?
No.
Yeah. How do you cope with having an Australian accent and big glasses to the point where, like, no matter what you say, will always just sound like you're the smartest person? Like, how do you deal with
it's
that?
actually
Like, how does the ego not get to you?
No,
Wait,
no.
you,
the problem
you
is,
think it's the
Fabian, that
smartest
different-
person?
Yeah.
I hear criminal.
Oh, you hear criminal?
Yeah.
There we go. History
I get-
joke. I got it, Jimbob. I'm there.
Yeah, so I get all kinds. I get you guys will see. I get all kinds of abuse. It's going to happen in the chat today, but you know, it keeps me humble. It keeps me humble because everyone rips into me for being Australian. But hey, you know what? The glasses are a new thing, and actually, Jimbob recently called me Rachel Maddow, which
Yeah, that's so mean. That's so mean.
No,
Well,
that's-
if it
no,
makes you
that's
feel
it.
better, you don't have a libertarian audience, okay? Because if you have a libertarian audience, it's a lot of autistic people that are like, "Why did you use that word? You're like, dude, I have the most hateful audience possible. It's just autistic nerds that are angry about a word I use, or people that are like have to tell me I'm wrong. Like 90% of my chat is just hate messages.
Libertarians are a bit like that, aren't they? I look at those libertarian conventions, and I'm like, oh man, it looks like a brutal environment.
We're the most gatekeeping ideology there is. Period.
Really?
Oh God, yeah.
It seems like it's such a broad swath of the population.
I went on
Tim
Temple. My entire audience was like, "Why does your shirt suck? And why are you so fat?" That was like literally just everyone from me. Everyone else was like, "You did a great job. You destroyed Connor." And then my own audience was like, "You're fat and your shirt sucks. What is wrong with you?" And I'm like, "I guess I'll lose weight."
I hung out. I was hanging out with the libertarians in Miami when I was there last year with guys like Luke Rakowski and a bunch of his friends and their community and everything, and like great guys and everything, but like all plucked from different parts of the population. There was like kind of this little amalgamation of people, which was interesting. But they were great guys. It was a good time.
Yeah, hell
What do you
yeah.
reckon, Jimbob? You like hanging out with all the libertarians?
Yeah, I mean, I went through my libertarian phase. You know, I call it like the girls always, you know, they go through their lesbian phase in college. I consider libertarianism that for men.
I think it's probably more like it's probably more like paganism as a phase. If it's a
Maybe,
phase, right?
maybe.
You know
yeah,
what I
that's
mean? Like
actually
I'm
more
really into
accurate.
Wicca. You know, like I really believe in it. What, you believe in some old British guy that like just like made up shit so he could fuck girls? Yeah.
Yeah. I
a
think
better analogy,
Douglas
I
Murray described it the other day as politically bisexual, which I thought was pretty funny.
Politically bisexual.
Fuck him.
All right, cool, fellas. Well, I'm gonna, yeah, I reckon we should probably get into this, and then, like I said, I'll introduce you guys, kick it into some opening statements, and then we'll let Bruce Buffer come in, and then we'll get into the dialogue. So,
I don't know
Vinny,
who that is,
let's,
but whatever. Cool.
Yeah, cool. You'll see. Vinny, let's go live. Welcome, everybody, to another Rattlesnake TV debate. We've done a hat trick, which is 3 days in a row, 3 debates, which is great. We are joined today by Jimbob and Fabian Liberty, and we are going to be debating the topic of libertarianism versus Christian nationalism. Should be a good one for us today. We're going to have 5 minutes each of opening statements, which we'll kick it into pretty shortly, and then we're going to go into at least 90 minutes of open dialogue, and we will see where it takes us. We'll see if we need to go longer, etc. If you guys would like to send super chats, you can do so, and I'm going to be seeing them on my screen here, and I'll bring them up as they come. You can grease the palms, help the grift out. That would be much appreciated. So with that, guys, let's kick it to Bruce Buffer, and then we'll go with opening statements.
And now, for the thousands in attendance, let's get ready to rumble!
All right, and with that, we didn't see who was going to go first. So, Jimbob, if you want to go first,
Sure.
The floor is all yours. 5 minutes.
Alrighty, thanks so much for having me, Jake. Thanks for Fabian Scott, I should call you, for joining. So yeah, the question is libertarianism. I assume we're going, well, which is better for society? From that perspective, I wanted to define society real quick: the aggregate of people living together in a more or less ordered community. So the reason I read that is the term order assumes some things. I would say order assumes that there's a layer of force there. There's a body of force. The question of what's better for society is a question of which worldview should inform and enforce the laws and norms. In contrast to Christian ethics, when we look at libertarianism, we see a philosophy of liberty for all and duties and obligations for none. It's very similar to feminism in that way. Libertarianism doesn't offer a system of how we should order society, nor does it offer an ethical system for moral behaviors. It has no safeguard against indecency or degeneracy so long as it's legal. Further, there's no normative authority for being a good or bad libertarian. And from that perspective, there's no accountability between people who call themselves libertarians as opposed to Christians who can do that and do a fairly good job at doing that. Libertarians often appeal to rights and property and the violations of rights and property. And in the same breath, they claim that the state is illegitimate. Now, I don't know that Scott holds the position, but libertarian can hold that position. If you don't see the problem with this, I'll make it clearer. The assumption of rights and property assume the enforcement of their violation. So if the state is illegitimate, which is just a body of men enforcing things, then which body of men is legitimate in defining and enforcing the violations of rights and properties under the libertarian view? Further, what are rights from a libertarian view? And what is property other than the possession, temporary or long-term, of an object or space which you are capable and willing to protect with adequate force? That includes potentially dying in reserving the space or the object. Under the Christian system, the church and the state would work in parallel and remain distinct. And if you're proclaimed to be Christian, that idea scares you, I would consider the following. There is no lawful society in which the seats of legislation and enforcement are not held by individuals whose worldviews inform how they use those seats. In other words, society requires law and order. Law and order requires a worldview to inform those laws, when and how to use that force. Libertarians cannot tell us who should be the standardized body of force. Some of them don't even believe there should be a standardized body of force. Some of them do think there should be, but maybe it's limited. They don't really agree much on anything. You can see sort of the fractioning of this online a lot of the time. They debate each other, which is fine. It's just that there is no one saying we have the normative authority on the position here. I would say that's a disadvantage when it comes to advocating for the system or the philosophy inside an ordered system. Why? Like I said in the beginning, an ordered system does assume some authority. So we also hear the dreaded NAP, the non-aggression principle, which is essentially the gun-free zone sign for libertarians, which, if you notice, does not apply to people who don't acknowledge it. I would say this structured society relies more so on initiating the threat of force than assuming the trust in the non-aggression principle. Rights are a perfect example. For instance, I don't believe in rights. I don't believe rights exist. Yet the belief in rights existing is forced upon me for the sake of function and order. The state says, do this or go to jail or be fined. So it's coercing behavior with the threat. It's using the threat of force to coerce behavior. Now, that's literally using the threat of force to compel behavior. And I think that's actually based and unavoidable in any ordered society. The question isn't whether there is a monopoly on force. The only question from my view is whose ethical paradigm should hold the monopoly of force. I say the Christian ethical system, because I believe it's superior to the nearly non-existent ethical system of libertarianism. My opponent says maybe no ethical system. So which is better? I believe the Christian ethical system is superior for the reasons I shared tonight.
All right. Thank you, Jimbob. And before we get into Fabian, Fabian, what's your name again? Your actual first name?
Just call me Scott.
What does Fabian mean?
So it's a reference to Fabian socialism, but it's the inverse, right? Using
Gotcha.
the Fabian strategy in the inverse to bring about liberty as opposed to socialism.
All right, well, Scott it is then. But before we get into Scott's opening statement, guys, we've got a poll up in the chat. What's better for society, Christianity or Christian nationalism, sorry, and libertarianism, or I'm not sure. So you guys will have another at least 5 minutes or so to get your vote in the poll. And then what we're going to do is at the end, we will run the same poll and we will see who was more convincing and who changed the most minds. So about 5 minutes to do that. And with that, Scott, 5 minutes on the clock. Let's get into it.
All right, thank you. Happy Good Friday. Appreciate being here. On July 17th, 1918, in the dead of night, then exiled royal family of Russia were rushed into a room under the pretext of evacuation. Sitting in a chair, Nicholas II, Alexandra, their children, and a few servants were executed by firing squads. Surviving the initial hail of bullets, they were bayoneted and then shot in the head. Their corpses dragged into the woods, burned, doused in acid, and thrown into an abandoned mine shaft. On the following day, the remainders of the royal line were buried alive inside another mine shaft. Such is the death of the last Christian monarch at the hands of socialism. Today we live under socialist states masquerading as liberal democracies, where over half of our wealth is stolen, subject only to multicultural social contracts no one has seen or signed. The law of the jungle is accepted, and the socialists have all but won by funneling our money into propaganda, world policing, degeneracy, and their own power. The present state of affairs is an obvious loss for mankind. A solution many have begun to embrace is Christian nationalism. Christian nationalists seek to control the socialist state and define the goals of the state through a national Christian identity, advocating to turn the guns against liberal rule and to enforce Christian values, laws, and symbols in public life. A new nation chose to uphold Christianity to turn the ship around. But this is a pathetic, half measure devoid of an understanding of history, culture, rights, and most importantly, deeply ignorant of power. I propose that Christians reject socialism and instead embrace a voluntary Christian monarchy under an anarcho-capitalist framework. They should not seek to impose their values onto heathens with guns and hope to control the socialist state only to suffer the same fate as the Romanovs. Christians should come together, lawfully obtaining property for a new nation, fighting for their right under libertarianism to voluntarily gather under a new banner and king. Subjects who wish to be a part of this new kingdom voluntarily agree to enter into a king's property and form a society of Christian cultural homogeneity. They should adopt a new king, guided by Symphonia. Subjects who attempt revolution, secularism, reform towards democracy should be forcefully removed pursuant to the contract they signed. Subjects will only come to the kingdom if they are willing to follow the king, God, and commit to a Christian way of life. To embrace Christian nationalism is to repeat the failures of the past, which is to compromise with sin. Christian nationalism is, in comparison to a voluntary Christian monarchy, is flawed for several reasons. It ties national identity and temporal concerns to the Christian faith instead of under direct direction of a monarchy advised by the church. Internal politics and power struggles are inevitable under a bureaucracy. The iron law of oligarchy will create factions within a nation where self-interested socialists will ruin a nation to create factions in power. Elected or appointed officials lack the capacity to maintain a cohesive, homogeneous culture like a king who owns the nation and serves the church. Constant coercion and violence must be used to enforce Christian will on heathens who are subject to the nation and resent Christian values. It forces a nation's subjects to live amongst and tolerate what Christianity deems evil. Soldiers must be conscripted from unwilling subjects, breeding ineffective armies, resentment, and worst of all, incentivizing war. Under a voluntary monarchy, armies are made of willing vassals who would only abandon a king if he fails in humility and stewardship, giving up their property and home, just as the king risks his kingdom in lieu of bureaucrats who only risk their station and stocks. Lastly, Christian nationalism risks tainting the identity of Christianity with the sin of theft and murder to maintain the state through taxes, coercion of non-believers, and corruption. Christian nationalism fails to learn from history and instead chooses to embrace the socialist state in hopes that a new political party can wrest control of the guns. These forms of coercion of non-believers and compromise is the very ignorance that spelled the downfall of Russia, Christian monarchy, and devastated the Orthodox Church. Nicholas II was not ousted and executed overnight. His reign came to an end because he attempted to control and compromise with evil, embracing socialism and bureaucracy. Pressured by industrialization, he chose to link his state with French loans and foreign influence. Instead of ousting the non-faithful and ensuring cultural homogeneity, he chose to allow the pogroms, growing socialism, and revolution in his state, compromising again by adding in a neutered parliament, the Duma, in 1905. He invested undue power and influence in Rasputin and allowed noble factions control with an ever-growing oligarchical governance. 15 million conscripts under an ever-growing bureaucracy left him with an unmanageable war, an army full of resent and trained to fight. No, Christians should not embrace this new socialism. They should learn from history and resurrect the true idea of a city upon a hill, attempting to live as an inspiration to the kingdom and the faith, not bogged down in bureaucracy and corruption and socialism. They should adopt an idea against socialism, respecting the right of man to not be murdered or stolen from, and gather together to create a society under their own values and beliefs, proving the morality and efficiency of their faith to the rest of the world.
Okay, nice work. All right, so guys, we're going to go into open dialogue now. The only time that I'm ever going to interrupt is if you guys are seriously talking over each other and we really need to get a handle on it, or if there's a topic that I think that we should move it on to if we get too circular. So with that, guys, let's move into opening dialogue.
Yeah, sure.
Do you want to go first or me? Because you have like a lot of pithy kind of things about libertarianism, and then I have like a full thing. So maybe ask questions about me.
So you said in that sort of historical dramatized delivery that that Christianity essentially forces its beliefs on people, and that's one of your counters
I said
to
Christian nationalism forces.
Yeah,
its
it
beliefs
forces
on
its beliefs, and
not Christianity.
Well, Christian nationalism forces its beliefs, its customs, its norms onto people, and I assume because you said that, you're assuming it's wrong. I didn't get that it's wrong. It just seems like something you don't like. But is it, from your perspective, are you saying that forcing your beliefs onto people is a red flag?
Well, it depends upon both the belief and what you mean by force, right? Like,
well, I don't believe
if you
in
mean
rights
like at the power of a gun, forcing them to do something against their will, then yeah.
Sure, I don't believe in rights. Isn't it
You don't believe
the
in
case that I live? Hold on. So I don't believe in rights. Isn't it the case that the belief in rights is forced on me?
In what way?
I am
you mean
born
under the
into
current
a
American system?
Yeah, the assumption of rights existing and the violation of such rights, isn't that a belief in something that I don't believe in that's forced upon me?
Yeah, I would say there are certainly avenues of the Constitution that they might call rights that aren't necessarily true rights that are forced upon you.
Well, I'm saying that under the libertarian perspective, even if you have varying degrees of a disagreement or whatever, isn't the fundamental assumption that you have some sort of innate sense of right and autonomy, and you have the right to property and movement and these kinds of things under a libertarian mindset? And that's the thing you're pointing to in Christianity to say, well, Christian nationalism is actually violating this thing. But what I'm saying is that we already have that. If you assume rights and you think a society should be structured around the assumption of rights, the belief in rights, and people don't have a choice, they have to actually engage in society as if rights exist, even if they don't believe they do. It seems you're gonna have to at least concede that even under your paradigm, you're actually enforcing your beliefs onto people.
Yeah. So what I would say is might doesn't make right, but it makes reality, right? And as you stated in your opening, an ordered society, like a society demands some level of cooperation, which requires order, right? And so there must be some mechanism to impose said order, right? So I don't think that I don't have any disagreement with you that, any system of imposed order is going to be imposed on others. The question of whether or not it is violating the rights of another person is a different conversation.
Well, that's the thing in question.
It's not necessarily. It's not necessarily pursuant to the topic, but that's fair.
It is because your core argument against Christian nationalism is there's going to be these moments where a Christian nationalist system is going to take their ethical system, their paradigm, and deploy it on the public
that's not my
by
core
force.
argument. That wasn't
Well, I
even
mean,
my
it's
opening statement.
Well, it's
No,
in.
no,
It was in there. It's in there, right?
My core argument is compare and contrast for what is better for society, right? Either Christian nationalism or the libertarian ethos. And under the libertarian ethos, you don't have this danger to your society that comes from this kind of game theory thing where you are forced to, in order to uphold those Christian values in that Christian nation, you use and impose force on those that don't want it, non-believers, right? Those that could potentially become revolutionaries.
Scott, how are you missing this? I'm a non-believer of rights. Isn't it the case that the system I'm in, which you defend, a libertarian defends rights, right? This assumption that society should start with the assumption that rights exist, and the violation of those rights justifies force.
You're dodging the argument again, right? The argument is not whether or not you don't believe in a thing and the thing is imposed upon you. I've already agreed to that. That's fine.
Okay.
Right?
Okay, great.
What the argument is that when you have a Christian nationalism, right, where the state wishes to impose upon its subjects or its citizens, many of whom are non-believers, and you have to use violence and force to kind of keep them in order and control them, that you run the risk of compromising the values of that nation state, because you always have to do this game theory cost of, well, am I going to spend money on the police? Am I going to spend ways? At what point do I crack down? And then at what point do I not crack down? Like you're constantly compromising with people that are not Christians, that do not live up to the Christian identity, that hate you, that are, I don't know, Jews or Muslims or what other people that are in your nation. And that game theory, you run that simulation long enough, you have a weakening nation that cannot maintain its ideals.
Well, I mean, that's the thing in question, the ideals. Like, if the ideals of the opposition are either non-existent, total moral relativism, degeneracy, progressivism, you see where that took us, right? That's unbridled as well. So from my perspective,
for sure,
Scott,
it's everywhere. It's everywhere. They have won. They have made degeneracy is won the day.
Okay. So the question is, I guess I should just skip to the core here. Is do you agree with, in my opener, do you agree that an ordered society requires some authority and force?
I mean, what do you mean by authority and force? But probably, yeah.
Okay, authority and force. I mean, someone, let's just grant rights exist and the violation of such, and that's managed. I'm saying the arbiter or mediator and the actual muscle that makes sure that some sort of trajectory of justice occurs. So I violate someone, it goes to an authority, it goes through a system, and it says, okay, well, we're going to find out if you were justified in doing that or not. It could be self-defense, it could be aggression. What I'm asking is, in an ordered society, from both of our views, isn't it the case that there's going to be a monopoly of force, and that would be the best system, that there is a standardized system of force, as opposed to
you don't necessarily need a monopoly on force. That's not true. I was agreeing with you until that moment, right? You can have a competition.
So are you arguing from your libertarian perspective that it's better to not have a monopoly on force for society?
I'm not necessarily, it depends on the society and the culture, right? So for example, like the most libertarian people in America right now would be like the Beachy Amish and the Mennonites, right? Those people are way more libertarian than anything else, right? And they have a system of banishment. They have a system of, rumspringa, so that, they make sure everyone in their society is, following their faith. And they have a monopoly on power and force. I mean, insofar that the United States government over top of them doesn't, impose in their daily lives, but like in the way that they're governing themselves and their society, right? They have a monopoly, but that doesn't necessitate that has to be that way. In the example that I gave, right, which is what I think is better for devout Christians that, want a Christian nation and ideals, which would be anarcho-capitalism, not Christian nationalism. I think that there are contradictions there. But I would say that under that system, that would also be another example of a monopoly on power and force. You have a king, right? Everyone has agreed to follow the rules of said king.
Okay, Fabian, let me ask you a different way.
But you can have insurance companies competing, rights enforcement agencies, things like that.
In two competing philosophies and systems, I'm holding one, you're holding one. In the one you're holding, does it argue for a monopoly of force or not?
it does not argue for a monopoly on force. Libertarianism doesn't tell you what you ought to do, right?
Right.
Libertarianism, it's like comparing apples and oranges to try and compare like
if it doesn't, okay, gotcha. If it doesn't give you oughts, is a society better off with some uniform oughts or not?
I mean, it's hard to prove that one way or the other, but I would say that like a homogenous society with uniform oughts is almost certainly going to be more functional, less degenerate, less prone to problems, more likely to less delinquency in children. And I think that's one of the biggest problems we have in America is so many different competing cultures have led to so many problems.
So pluralism is not an advantage. You're not a diversity as our strength kind of guy. However, you do admit that if there was a Christian society and they had a uniform system of ethics that held each other accountable to those ethics, legally and non-legally, by the way, socially, there's a lot of power and social pressure, as we know from the last 5 years, is that you are basically saying, yeah, that's kind of superior in its function and its application and its use than the pluralism that libertarianism can actually produce. Because you got to admit you guys do have a lot of sort of counterpoints within your own sect, if you will. The fact that you don't have an ought is kind of another thing I had in my opening is like, well, hold on, if you assume rights exist,
real quick,
ought we value?
You made a couple claims there. You made a couple claims there, right? Which is that libertarianism can produce pluralism. You're absolutely right. Christianity and religions can produce awful systems too, right? Like, I'm not arguing in favor of pluralism. That's not my argument. And neither does libertarianism. Libertarianism is a descriptive system, right? So it doesn't produce that. It just says that if you are not violating the non-aggression principle, then whatever ethical system you say cannot be proven to be unethical. But if you are producing an ethical framework that says we are allowed to murder and steal, etc., via argumentation, that's not valid, and that's just not a valid form of ethics. It doesn't stop you from doing it.
Yeah, I understand, but the thing is like if you don't implement, if you don't make an ought claim and then take a hold of the positions of power in government legislation and the body of force, if you don't implement your ethical positions, you're going to create a vacuum. As we've seen, the left progressive worldview has actually 100%. Taken that approach, right?
That's why I gave you a framework that's superior to Christian nationalism, that's commensurate with libertarian philosophy.
No, but it can't
which
be
is the
because
debate.
No, because it's not superior, because the one that can actually govern and by their ought claims, that actually can practice and present the oughts and hold other people to account, that's actually going to produce something that's more uniform and more sustainable than libertarianism. It's not that libertarianism and some other view can't produce pluralism. It's that libertarianism, I don't think, can produce anything other than pluralism. And the reason
that's nonsense. I literally just my entire opening statement is an example
here's why
that is commensurate with libertarianism.
I'll tell you why it can't. Because you can get a bunch of libertarians, three gangs of libertarians, and they all seek different things, and they're all and one of them is willing to use force and the threat of coercion. Are you going to say they're just not real libertarians?
So one of them is there's nothing wrong with force. There is coercion, of course.
Let's take a different example. A libertarian you meet is totally fine with public indecency, nudity, public boners.
I know that this is, again, just to remind the audience, right? You are now engaged in a conversation about whether or not libertarianism, which does not make moral ought claims, but is commiserate with other philosophies that do indeed make moral ought claims. You're saying that libertarianism by itself must therefore produce. Yeah, I agree that it's insufficient. It doesn't have an opinion on that.
Is it insufficient to Christian? Wait. If the only
it doesn't have an opinion on that, right? Like what I'm saying is that Christian nationalism, right, is as a system is inferior to those that are commiserate with libertarianism.
How?
I gave an entire opening statement as to
no, you gave a story. You gave an look. We all heard it. The only thing missing was violin music. You gave an emotional statement about history that you don't like. That's it.
No,
Like,
I gave it. I used a story. There's this thing in rhetoric called energeia, right? Which is where I use the story to frame and contextualize an understanding of the past failures of Christian monarchies.
That's what energeia means?
Was when you feel like you're a part of a story via rhetoric, right?
Yeah,
Which
no,
is
I
what
understand, but there wasn't an argument in the opening.
There was absolutely
It was just
multiple arguments.
No,
I'll give them to you right now, and I'll read from my
I'll
notes.
tell you what. I'll tell you what you gave.
Don't tell me that there's not, and don't tell me there's not an argument.
Hold on.
You're saying there's not an argument. I have them right here in front of me. It's not my fault if you didn't listen.
You presented an image of what you think Christian nationalism is.
Oh, so you're saying you have a different definition of Christian nationalism than I do?
Why would I accept yours?
Well, I will posit one if you think that mine is incorrect.
In my opening, I said Christian nationalism is nothing more than people, right? In the current system, to start, let's say, people seek positions of office, and the law, the legislation, the legislative body, the enforcement arm, being that they share a Christian lens, that their actions and the laws are informed by their view. That's already what we have. All we're missing is enough Christians, by the way. So you would have the same position, right, with libertarianism. So libertarians.
Well, no, because I don't believe in like social contract theory of the United States government, like imposing via the will of democracy on the losers things they don't like.
Okay, but what's the alternative, right? Let's say your worst case scenario.
The alternative is thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not steal, right? Like that's the alternative.
So your alternative is Christian ethics.
Well, the alternative for the Christian would be that, right?
Who's going to enforce that?
Whomever is in a position of authority that people voluntarily associate themselves with.
No, I meant by alternative. I said, what's the alternative from your view? Let's grant you the worst case scenario Christian nationalism that you did in your opening. Just grant that story that's going to happen every time. Okay, what's your alternative from a libertarian perspective?
I gave you one, right? A voluntary anarcho-capitalist society that is monarchical. That is a Christian monarchy.
But a monarchy has some sort of authority in not only producing, maintaining, but enforcing law, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So what worldview enforces this monarchical law?
If you're following the non-aggression principle, right? You're following libertarian ethos, right? Which would allow you to be able to say that you have an actual ethical system, right? Individuals would rally together, right? Voluntarily take in their property. And if they have a king that they so choose to wish to follow, they want to start a Christian nation. Some great leader steps forward and does that, right? Some line somewhere, whatever it may be, whatever the belief is of those Christians, they can then sign a contract that says, I will be a loyal subject. I will be pursuant to the laws that are set up by the king. I will be pursuant towards this government system. And if I violate said contract, if I stop following these laws, I give up all of my property. I give up everything. And I'm banished from society.
I understand, but Scott, I'm asking you a different question. You're just assuming that if they assume the non-aggression principle, I'm saying why ought they assume that and not just the aggression principle?
Oh, you're saying why shouldn't the Christian monarchy just come in and like raid the villages and genocide?
Yeah.
Well, they couldn't claim. I mean, they could do that. Obviously, history has shown us that they do it all
from
the
the
time.
libertarian perspective?
Well, because you couldn't justify that as ethical, right? Like they could do it. The plenty people have, but you wouldn't be able to justify it as ethical.
Don't have an ethical ought system.
There's a difference between ought and ought not, right? Like you understand that.
No, oughts are oughts, ought not or ought to, the same category.
What I would say is, if you are attempting to justify your system, and your system is coercive, and we've gone over this before in other debates, and I think it really gets away from Christian nationalism versus libertarianism.
What's wrong with coercion?
What do you mean
from a libertarian perspective? This is what I put in my opening, Scott. Let me get this out. I put it in my opening.
You asked me a question, and now you
right?
add context.
I'm just summarizing. I just want
to.
I
wouldn't
sure.
just answer the question.
Well, I just want you to really get the meat of it. Okay.
Okay.
This.
I think I get the meat of it.
The assumption of rights and property, right, is backed by an authority that uses coercion that says if you do X, then this will happen with the gun. Yes.
Okay, so you believe that. So you believe it's coercion if, for example, I put up a sign that says "No trespassing" on my yard?
No, I said the enforcement of the sign.
Okay,
Why put up a sign?
Hold on. No trespassing. Violators will be shot. You believe that's coercion?
What's trespassing?
What do you mean? What's trespassing? It's a
What
sign
if-
that says you're on my
No,
property.
what-
I'm asking,
what-
is that coercion? Just answer the question. I know you like to dodge questions. Just answer the question. Is
If
that or is
it's-
that not coercion?
If it's backed by a monopoly of force, a state that then gets to process whether Scott was correct in his reaction to
No.
the
It's backed by a monopoly of one, my property, and a guy with a gun. It says violators will be shot. No trespassing. Is that not coercion?
No, that's not coercion.
Okay,
because,
go ahead.
But you don't need the sign. So there's no reason to put the sign up. I'm saying that if in an ordered society, someone could just not have the sign. Someone can say, wear a sign that says, I have a lot of force. I'm actually coming into your homestead and taking it over. I have the sign. That's not like whatever it.
So what's your definition of coercion then?
Fabian, the meat of the question is this. If you're arguing that a libertarian society, I define society in the opening to mean an ordered system, right? Do we agree? An ordered system. So if the ordered system agrees with this term called trespassing, which is now a legal term, not a Wild West vigilante, right? This is a legal term in the ordered society.
I mean, like, a no trespassing sign would be intersubjectively communicated, right?
Is property illegal?
You don't need a state for people to understand that.
Is property a legal term in an ordered society?
Is property a legal term? I mean, property would be both a legal and philosophical term.
Okay, great. So if it's a legal term, because the argument is what's better for society, society presupposes some type of order, that there's a large agreement within the ordered system with the threat of punishment and enforcement. So the reason I'm asking this question is, if someone trespasses and legally that's your property, that is to say, if there was no state, if there was no law, it's actually not legally your property. It's just your property so long as you can defend it, right? It's totally fair to take.
I wouldn't agree to that, but I assume you're using.
Well, you have to. I don't know how you're going to disagree with that.
I don't have to.
How are you?
Libertarianism is a philosophy of natural law, right? Like, obvious. That's what it is, right? It is.
No.
It is
Natural law.
Don't know me. That's like the oldest 101 shit. Like, you prep for this.
Law.
You know. If you don't know natural law, if you think natural law philosophy is crazy when mentioning libertarianism, then you didn't do a single bit of fucking prep whatsoever.
I just can't believe you used it. So let's stick to the first part of this.
It's like 101 shit. That's what it is.
Yeah, I know. 101.
We're going with the definition of the thing, and you're like, what? Crazy.
Let's stick to
Never heard
property
that.
for a second. In an ordered society, the term property you agreed is philosophical and legal. Absent the legal, if it was just in the woods, right? It wouldn't be legal. It would just be a philosophical term. So being that we're talking about society, which includes other people not in the woods, but a legal framework, when someone crosses your property and you do something to them, is it automatically determined to be justified just because you had a nap sign? Or does it go to a legal system, an authority that then mediates and arbitrates whether or not, Scott, you actually were in the right?
It's funny because I've watched your debates enough to know what you're trying to do to me.
Stop
right?
the meta, dude. Stop the meta. Just answer the question.
No. It's fine. It's fine. It took you like 15 tries to finally get to
what was my question?
Right. So the question is if there is no legal framework, it's just you and a person in the woods and they trespass, right? Have you broken some level of
I didn't
law
ask that.
If it does not go to a legal authority?
I didn't ask that.
That's the counterfactual of your question, but reword it if you would like.
Dude, you just appealed to the thing I didn't say. I wanted to get to that, but
I know. Sorry, I apologize. I've seen you do this thing a bunch of times, so it's like I kind of just want to hurry up to the end.
Okay. In a legal, well, if you listen to the question, we can get to the end faster. So if in a legal system, there's a thing called property. When someone crosses your property, Scott, and you aggress them in response.
Which legal system?
In our current legal system, let's say Florida.
Okay, cool.
So when you do something to them, is it already established just because you have a nap sign that you're justified, or does it defer to an authority to determine whether it's justified?
Well, so the authority doesn't actually do the determination of whether or not it's justified. The authority just imposes its will, right? Our legal framework isn't like they can claim that they're justifying things, right? I could like the Securities and Exchange Commission could claim tomorrow, right, that like anybody that trades in stocks of a value over $10,000 is actually like stealing from the poor, right? And then they could no, I'm going to finish this. It's fine.
Dude,
so then they could do that. So relax. Right. So when you say that they're making the justification, right, they're claiming to make the justification under our current legal framework.
I didn't ask if you agree with it. I didn't ask if you agree with it. Right now, practically speaking, Scott, when someone aggresses you,
it's fine.
When someone aggresses you and trespasses on your property and you do something, when you shoot them, Scott, are you going to call the police or not? Now,
well, of course, I'm going to call the police after I shoot them because I'm going to go to jail if I don't.
Well, no, not just that. You could go to jail if you do. That's my point. Is that when you call
if they weren't going to put me in jail and some murderer does it, I'm going to put him in my garden to fertilize my fucking grass. Fuck that murderer. His corpse is mine now.
That's my point exactly. So now,
or a burglar. Sorry.
Under that system, when you call the police, then what happens?
Well, if you don't live in a bad neighborhood, the police show up relatively quickly.
And then what happens?
And then they do an investigation.
Right. And then someone determines, or a body of an authoritative body decides Scott was in the right, correct?
Yes, some people that have imposed their will over me and citizens say they're right.
This is great. This is great. So the authority that you defer to from your libertarian view is an imposition, right? It's illegitimate, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, of course. The state is illegitimate as a libertarian.
Okay. Given in my opener, we both agree that an ordered society relies on the assumption of some sort of law and consequence of violating said law.
Yeah,
if the state is illegitimate, under a libertarian working society, who is the legitimate enforcer and arbitrator of who did something right or wrong?
Yeah. So again, it would depend upon. So there is an objective person that committed an act, right? You can agree to that, right? Like a burglar did burglarize or did break into my domicile. Even we don't have to get into whether or not I owned it or whatever. A burglar did. So there is an objective reality that an action occurred. You agree to that?
Yeah, an event.
Right. So when you say who is the arbiter, what we're talking about is who is it that works with imperfect knowledge, because humans don't have perfect knowledge, right? We're not always able to, with 100% accuracy, to determine the validity of someone's witness testimony or the evidence to prove that said person did that, right? We can have cases where it's cut and dry and cases where it's gray. So we recognize that in order for us to function as a society, that we have to have some system in order to, in order for people to not be afraid to walk out of their home, in order for people to drive to work and do things. But whether or not that is, who that is, under our current framework, it's the United States government. Under a libertarian framework, it is what people have voluntarily agreed to.
So voluntary state.
Right. So in my opening statement, right, like it would be the king and whatever system the king set up. Right. That is the Christian monarchy that I proposed, right?
No, that's what you think you're advocating for. But this is the thing: to get to that position,
who would be
whoever imposed their will with force. That's who it would be.
Well, hold on. That doesn't make any sense. I propose a system where thousands of people get together, voluntarily sign a contract, and agree to follow a king, right? Maybe tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands. They all agree to do this. They all recognize the authority of the king, and then you say, but no, it wouldn't be the king. It would be whoever imposes their will. They all got together and collectively gave the right of the king to be the one to make those determinations.
That's a suggestion for all the people that didn't sign up and don't want that. There's going to be some friction, I would say, perhaps even some violence, Scott. So it goes back to my
point. Which was my argument in my opening statement, which is that those people that do not wish to be a part of a Christian monarchy, those that violate those contracts. What do you mean violence?
No, they didn't agree, dude. They didn't agree to how could you violate a contract you didn't agree to?
They would have to agree to it in order for it to
or else Yeah.
What do you
or
mean?
Else?
What are you talking about?
Or else what? Threat of the gun or what?
Should I just reread my opening statement? Because it seems like
No,
every time I
please,
bring it
God,
up, you have
for
no
God's
idea what's
sakes,
going on.
don't do that.
You don't want to hear a good
No.
story again? Come on.
No,
It seems like you
dude,
weren't listening.
dude.
You were so enamored. You started imagining the music you were going to write to accompany my opening statement. You didn't listen to the arguments.
Scott, you totally obfuscated the point here, which
What
is
did I
this.
obfuscate?
I asked you pretty clearly, and you agreed that in the event someone steps on your property in a legal sense, and you shoot them dead, you call the police, and then the police run you through a system. And you agreed that that body, even though you would do that because you're sort of coerced to, if you don't, it's a crime. Got it? Okay. So I asked you, okay, if there was no authority to call, right? If there was no state to call in that instance, who would be? I asked you who would be the authority in telling you whether or not you were just in the event or not.
I answered
and
that
you gave me
question.
this long-winded. No, you did not answer.
No, I gave you an immediate answer. The immediate answer was who the society, because you're claiming there is some.
Who they vote for?
Nobody said anything about voting.
Okay, let me get this straight. We push a button. There's no
I answered the
state.
question. I don't
Hold on,
understand. What do you want?
Scott,
Go
I
ahead.
just want you to show you how absurd this is. We push a button tomorrow. There's no state. Someone comes in, steps over your property, which is now not a legal term, but a philosophical one. You shoot them dead. There's no one to call. So the question of how do we determine if what Scott did was just and right without any sort of authority? I asked you, how would we do that? It sounded like you said, well, we all come to a contractual agreement to have a king.
So
is that what you said?
No, what I'm saying, and I like this. You can steal it if you want, if you ever want to become a libertarian, right? Might doesn't make right. Might makes reality, right? If I have the guns, I can impose my will on you, but that doesn't mean that I'm justified in doing so. Just because I have the power to do it,
dude. I know what you're saying. It's just the question is, if there was no
voluntary, if there is no state, right, and an individual is alone in the woods, then it's just them. If there are two individuals, it's just the two of them. If there are three individuals, just the three. And however long that goes. And if you wish to live not in the woods alone, you wish to live in an ordered society, which it seems like you obviously do, where people can trade and where people can, benefit from each other's
not trade
strengths and
everything.
weaknesses. Right, of course. I don't,
Well, no, not
trade
of course.
wives or anything.
Well, no, not under libertarians. It's not, of course. It's actually open to a lot of transactions that are permitted under libertarianism that wouldn't be permitted under Christianity. We can get into, but I just want to highlight that this line of questioning exposes something deeply erroneous and lacking in the libertarian mindset and philosophy and practicality. Is this? If there is no normative authority to determine whether or not you are just in your actions against aggression, then there's no authority to determine you're unjust in your aggression. And if your answer is, well, we have to have some sort of contractual agreement. Well, what are contracts backed by other than assuming the force that doesn't exist right now in this hypothetical? A contract is an agreement. Hold on. A contract is an agreement that assumes legality. In my hypothetical, Scott, I just want you to know my hypothetical removed legality. So what the hell is a contract without the threat of force, coercion?
So a contract that is not backed up by anything is ultimately useless, right? Like there is a wonderful.
Yeah, thank you.
Hold on. There's you act like you're getting me on something, but you're just describing my own philosophy whilst acting like you're winning, right?
No,
So again, there's a wonderful article by like this crazy gay anti-feminism dude that went out into the woods to do Nazi shit and fuck dudes, but great article, right? Even though the dude is wild.
I think that's a libertarian thing, not a Nazi thing. Go ahead.
No, I think it was a Nazi thing in this regard, but who knows, And he wrote this article, "Violence is Golden," and I would suggest everybody read it. It's only a couple pages, but it is, violence is the ultimate answer to the question, or else what? Right? Like if everyone can, voluntarily agree to a bunch of cool things, but ultimately it only takes one person to go, or else what? And if you don't have some system of force to say, or else I'll beat you in the head with this pipe, or else I'll physically remove you, then, well, that's not coercion.
Yeah,
that is an answer. No, it isn't.
Of course it is. I do this or else.
No, hold on. You already admitted that you would say that it's not coercion if someone puts a sign up on their property that says no trespassing, violators will be shot. You said that's not coercion.
I agree.
So that's a bit of a contradiction.
I agree, but the thing is, under that system, what you call coercion can't. There's nothing wrong with it anyway, because there's no normative system to say that's wrong. Let's process this. It's illegal. This is what I'm trying to get you to understand. In the hypothetical where I remove the state and someone comes onto your property and you shoot them, and I ask you who arbitrates, who decides whether or not you were just, and you said, well, we come up with contracts. I reveal to you and the audience that contracts presuppose the government. That is to say, there's already a body of force that uniformly enforces the violation or the breach of the contract. Yes, it does. So you admitted it.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, you admitted it, Scott.
No, I didn't.
You said no. Hold on. I'll let you talk in a second. You admitted. I don't give you back.
Full of shit, but it's okay.
You said, Scott, a contract without force, without consequence, the threat of some consequence is meaningless. That means all that means, Scott, is that what you call the state is now just a single person, a man, or a group of men. That's essentially what the government is, dude.
I'll deal with that statement later,
Sure,
right? So again, a contract does not. What I said is that if a society which needs to be ordered, has no mechanism of violence in any way, then one need only say, or else what? And then it kind of falls apart. But that doesn't necessitate that a contract requires violence. There are plenty of times where I could go up to someone and say, hey man, gentlemen's bet, the Eagles are going to win the Super Bowl, $1, right? We've just formed a contract. There that is a contract, whether or not someone with guns is willing to show up and arrest my friend if he doesn't give me the $1 when it turns out that the Eagles did win the Super Bowl. It's still a contract, regardless of whether or not those guns come.
Nah, dude.
It's a
dude. No. I'm saying that if the contract was bound by something, it has to be force in the end. Why? Because if the person refuses to even pay the dollar back, it's up to the person who they're not paying to determine whether they're going to use force or not.
You think just contracts don't exist without the state?
You admit no.
Is that not a contract? Is that not a verbal agreement? If you and I come to a verbal agreement, is that not a contract?
Scott, swap state with any singular or group of men who are willing to use force to basically reciprocate the failed agreement of behavior. Okay, so
you're saying a contract cannot exist unless people are willing to commit violence.
I agree with you that a contract is meaningless without some sort of consequential threat.
That's not the question. I know you like to dodge questions, but
this is the question. That's exactly a projection.
No, this is the question. What question have I dodged? Hold on, pause.
The one you said, I'll get to that later, right? I'll get to that later.
That was a statement that you made, not a question. And then after I answered one question, you came in with more questions. So I didn't get to that, but that's fine. The question that you dodged is this. If you and I, regardless of any threat of violence, come to a gentleman's agreement about something and says, if I will cut your grass, you'll give me $20, right? So now this is an exchange, or let's not say dollars because the state or whatever, a gold bar or a sliver of gold dust, right?
Sure.
Is whether or not someone enforces the contract, is that a contract, yes or no?
Whether or not it's enforced, it's a meaningless contract if there's no.
All right. You're not going to answer the question. Got it. All right.
You admit it.
Dodgy little Jimbob. I get it.
I gave you your answer, dude.
We'll go on.
I literally gave you the answer you gave, which is this, and you could go back 3-4 minutes, Scott, right?
I asked you a direct question. I didn't ask you to attempt to recite what I'm saying.
Hey, whether or not
it's all right, we can move on.
Dude, whether or not something's backed with force, you stated yourself that a contract that isn't backed with some sort of threat is meaningless. I agree with you. Now you're saying, can't you have a contract that's not backed with any threat? And if the answer is yes, I'm going to agree with you. Yeah, you can do that, but it's meaningless. In other words, if the person who mows the lawn,
there we go. We finally get to it. Yes, it is a contract. You said earlier that could not be a contract.
Hold on a second. The question isn't whether or not you could have an agreement that just falls flat. The question is whether or not the person who paid the person to mow the lawn is just in using force. Is he or not?
Is the person just in using force without any other
to get the $20? To get the $20,
agreed.
He mowed the lawn.
Yeah, you're absolutely justified in using force to get whatever.
Who
$20.
determines whether in libertarianism, in a society that has no state to appeal to, who determines whether it was just or not to go get your money forcefully?
Again, seems like just a category.
Total dodge, dude.
No, you're just interrupting.
Answer the question, bro.
I'm answering it. But I'm just pointing out first that it's a category error and a tactic. Because
How?
you don't want to have the debate. You want to have
the two categories? Stop dodging. What's the two categories?
Morality and ethics, right?
I didn't. No. Just.
Are they just?
Right?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. So we're ethics and ethics.
You said libertarianism doesn't have an ethical paradigm. Okay.
The category, libertarianism doesn't give oughts, right? It tells you.
Great. So ought people pay what they agree to pay? Ought they, Scott?
Are you
in a libertarian society?
I'm gonna wait till you're done Spurgeon, and then I'll go.
I'm asking if you're not going to answer one question, I'll just do a different question.
No. I'm just waiting for you to finish and then let me answer. And then I'll go.
Tell me the question I asked you that you're totally dodging. Tell me it.
I'm not totally dodging anything. You're asking.
Then tell me what it is.
First, can I? Am I allowed to? All right.
You probably won't.
All right. Calm down a little bit. All right. So with the initial context is the cutting of the grass for $20, right? Just remind everybody. And then you said, is the person justified in going to reclaim their $20? I said, yes, they are justified in reclaiming their $20 because they had a verbal agreement. And then you followed up with the question of, well, without some governing body, without some mechanism, who determines this? And I've already answered this question like 15 different ways to you, which is, again, in a voluntary society, it depends upon how those people have, what legal framework they themselves have agreed to set up.
That's not an answer. Dude,
it absolutely is, because libertarianism does not propose a specific type of government. That's the category error.
Gotcha. Okay, I want you to all hear this. Okay, this is a complete. This concedes the entire debate.
It does not concede the entire debate. You're trying to compare apples and oranges.
In a debate on what's better for society, Scott right here just said libertarianism, which is the thing he's defending, doesn't offer any sort of ethical paradigm of why you should abide by and follow through with contracts, right? Further, when I asked him, is it justified for the man who mowed the lawn to use force to literally otherwise steal, right? If it wasn't in response to an agreement, steal the $20 that he's owed. I asked Scott a simple question. Under libertarianism, which is the thing he's defending and proposing as some sort of system, right? Under that system, without a state, who or what determines whether it was just for the lawnmower Jeffrey to go over and rip the $20 with a knife, with a gun from the hands, from the dresser of the man who told him he would pay him? The answer I get from Scott is, it depends on the society. Dude, the society that you're arguing for, dude.
Yeah, I think you just don't understand what libertarianism is.
Gaslighting.
So
now
I'm not gaslighting. I've answered the question so many times, right? Like what I am saying. So let me break it down for you. So, right. So libertarianism is a descriptive philosophy of natural law. Your eyebrows went up when I said that the first time. What it is saying is that so long as we adhere to logic, and we attempt to justify ethical claims, and we attempt to justify as this is right and this is wrong, that if your ethical system does not follow the non-aggression principle, then it cannot be logically justified. That is, and then from that we stem certain things like estoppel principle. There are other like elements that come from that first user principle of property. There are other domains, other arguments that kind of stem as like natural conclusions of that. But when you ask me, according to libertarianism, who is the arbiter in society that determines this right or wrong, it is a perfectly valid answer under libertarianism to say, well, it depends on how the society that voluntarily came about.
It depends on. I'm asking you.
It could be fucking rights enforcement agencies. It could be the Christian monarchy that I suggest.
People do. They say, "Oh, I can hold a number of views." Are you not Fabian Liberty Scott debating two positive claims. One is Christian nationalism. That's from me. Libertarianism from you. That's a positive position. I ask you directly, Scott, under your account of libertarianism, in the event the man who mows the lawn is not paid and he uses force, even hurts the person to get the $20. I ask you, under your system, which you're proposing tonight, in contrast to Christian nationalism, who and what is the authority that determines whether...
Are you just going to keep going in circles? I've answered this question like 15 times. You're just not understanding. You're aggressively misunderstanding libertarianism. That's all you're doing right now. Like it's silly.
So we don't know.
Like
who. Depends. It depends.
Again, what is libertarianism? I will repeat the answer for like the 15th time or 16th, however many times it takes for your thick head to get it.
Move into a different part of the debate. So yeah.
Right. So again, right? Like the debate is about what is better for society, and I gave an many examples of why Christian nationalism fails. We've gone into this ethics portion because I understand you don't want to compare the things that I put forward in my opening statement. I get that, right? And so in this domain, yeah, I know you're mad that I prepared an opening statement that sounds
a
good.
story,
My bad.
An emotional story.
The first paragraph and the second to last paragraph out of about
zero premises, zero conclusions. Go ahead.
Again, you're making these claims just because you didn't listen to the fact that there are tons of arguments in here.
Listened.
But
I almost teared up.
Apparently not.
So
again, I will answer. You were teared up and not on. I don't get it.
I was moved.
There are plenty of arguments.
Closer to Christian nationalism.
There are plenty of arguments. I will forward you the words, and I will forward anyone that asks my intro statement that's typed up so they can see that there are plenty of arguments in there. But again, libertarianism is a descriptive. It is a philosophy of natural law. Descriptive philosophy. Okay, it is not. Do
societies run on descriptions? Do societies work on descriptions?
This is getting silly. You're acting like a top.
No.
All right, fellas, we're going to move this on now. I want to go into another section where we put Christian nationalism on trial a little bit more, sort of get into the weeds of that a little bit. So, Jimbob, if you don't mind sort of giving your definition of Christian nationalism, what Christian nationalism is, and then, Scott, you can try and pick it apart however you'd like.
Yeah. Well, first of all, in being an advocate for Christianity in general, taking a more national level approach to it will require conversion first and foremost, families second, and growing outward communities. So it's not something that you push a button and you just make it happen, still being the minority of the country. First, people think that
it would have to be a majority Christian country.
I'm talking. Okay, hold on. So from my perspective, to start, I think it's fine to say Christian nationalism acted out in the current paradigm we're in is simply Christians taking their ethical systems into seats of government, informing laws, norms, these types of things, and legislating from the Christian ethical paradigm. The reason I believe this, not that I agree with all the voting, me and Scott could probably agree on all of the mess that is democracy and let's say pseudo-democracy. But regardless, we're in the system we're in. So currently, Christian nationalism, from my view, is Christians taking seats of office and legislating policy that's derivative of their worldview. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. Why? Because everyone else does that, as I put in my opening. Everyone else, including the progressive scumbags, they get into seats of power, and guess what informs their policy? Their worldview, even if it's shit, even if it's incoherent. I would argue that in the system we're in, being that Scott has to deal with the system we're in, he would also have to take seats of government, which is kind of a funny irony for libertarians to infiltrate the power system that they deny should exist in the first place. Christian nationalism is simply informing policy through a Christian ethical system. So a perfect example is if some Christian listening right now says, dude, Jimbob's a nutcase. I'm totally fine with a Christian home based. I'm fine with a Christian town based, Christian school based, Christian city based. Then I ask, oh, what about Christian law? And they're, oh my God, this is too crazy. That's violating, everything I know about Ben Shapiro.
It's a good comic. I saw the comic. It's a good one.
Yeah. It's very similar. That's actually what we started engaging with. And the thing is, everyone else, if government is otherwise a vacuum and Christians don't take those positions and inform their policy from their worldview under the guise that they don't want to enforce their beliefs on people. Well, as I pointed out to Scott and everyone in the audience, the idea of rights, this whole Enlightenment project, is itself a belief system that's totally forced upon people. So why should Christians accept classical liberalism, libertarianism, this kind of rights-based project that's totally ambiguous over, I don't know, just doing what everyone else does anyway? Take positions of power and inform your policy through a Christian lens. That's Christian nationalism.
So that's a pretty long definition. I have a few problems with your definition. Number one, your definition of Christian nationalism has nothing of nationalism in it. So that's kind of weird. It's not really
what does that mean?
Well, you don't have like tying Christian ethic to the national identity, utilizing Christian.
No, that's just your definition, dude. Why are you going to straw man not my position? You're like, no. I have a proper definition of Christian nationalism that I prepare to argue.
I let you go through. I let you go through a definition that was half as long as my opening statement. Right? It's a very bad definition. So let's get into it.
You need to use my definition because that's what I came prepared to attack.
Right, I'm perfectly okay with us accepting that proponents of ideologies get to define them. So therefore, you have accepted that I will define all of the libertarian definitions here, and that's okay. And you can define the Christian nationalism definition. So working off of what your definition is, which isn't what I necessarily prepared for, because I've never heard Christian nationalism used as we voted for Christians, therefore it's Christian nationalism. There's two big things that jump out. Number one, if libertarians, as you said, were voted into office and they were all Christians and they all believed in dissolving the nation state in favor of my system, that would be Christian nationalism, would it not?
That assumes they're compatible. They're not. If you want to have that debate next time, Scott, I'm happy to destroy the assumption that libertarianism is compatible with Christianity. Nice try, though.
Okay, so you're saying that we're doing a no true Scotsman fallacy, that any Christian that comes into government that claims to be a libertarian is actually not a Christian because they're libertarian? What is it about being libertarian that makes them not a Christian?
I didn't say they're not a Christian. I said it's incompatible with Christianity, Christian deontology, Christian obligations and duties. Why is that the case? Because being a libertarian assumes that autonomy and liberty is above, it's the highest virtue above all of these other things. Under a Christian paradigm, you would use force to stop people from doing horrific things, even if they were liberated in doing it. I could give perfect examples, Scott. If someone was about to end themselves, they were my brother or friend, under the libertarian view, one might say, you have no right to violate their autonomy. They're about to do something to themselves that they've thought through, and we have to trust their autonomy. I would use force and violate their rights. If someone was naked, right, and they weren't harming anyone, ambiguous term under libertarianism, on the street, right? They just
you now know what libertarianism is, but you didn't even know natural law.
Hold on. They just happened to have a boner in public. They didn't harm or step on anyone's property. They didn't violate. They didn't steal anything. I would use force to violate their autonomy and remove them. Another example.
So this is a really long example. Can you answer the question though? Because you still have
the question assumes no true Scotsman assumes there's no normative authority for what a Christian is. That's not even true.
I asked you a simple question, right? Like you did to me, right? The question is, what is it that makes a libertarian incapable of being a Christian?
Because a libertarian has to abandon libertarianism to be a Christian on the grounds that I just stated, that they have to be willing to abandon liberty above all for the sake of virtue, in the act of removing someone from society, from the public, removing the gun from someone who's about to harm themselves, stopping, let's say, two brothers from marrying each other. You know what I mean? Like,
so
this kind of stuff.
Is it impossible for a Christian to be a pacifist? Believe that they
that's not what a no, you're trying to
I'm just asking you, is it impossible for
pacifist?
Is it or is it not?
No, the question is malformed, because here's the thing: being a pacifist, there could be a moment where you ought be a pacifist, and there's a moment where you ought not be a pacifist. So that's a loaded question. It assumes that there's a true dichotomy. It's not. Try again.
No, I asked you. It's a very simple question, right? Is if someone is a pacifist, are they incapable of being a Christian?
What does that mean?
Because they're pacifists.
No, what does that mean?
That they choose not to engage in any violence ever against another.
I would say that a pacifist, in the act of being aggressed, his family, like if it's his duty to defend his family as the extended body of Christ, of the church. It's his duty, and he's just to defend his family. If he's a pacifist and he doesn't defend his family, his whole family dies on the grounds of what really is some sort of Buddhist invasion of a modern, nice Christ, right? Christ.
He's never heard of Buddhism. He just doesn't like violence.
No. Under the Christian paradigm, Scott, God is a man of war. Okay, he's a divider. He comes with a sword. This pacifist ponytail Jesus who's doing fucking yoga retreats is a fiction. It's a straw man. Please try again.
It's not try again. It's I just asked you a question and you went on a diatribe.
I said
about
if
it.
someone
The answer is no, right? The answer is
I'm
just
telling
no.
you why the answer. I can't just say no. I have to say why it's a no, so the audience understands that in the event where a Christian has the duty to defend his family, who is a part of the body of Christ, they are icons of God, an extension of the church, that is superior than being a turn the other cheek pacifist. So they can't fully be an absolutist in pacifism. No.
So they can't, right. So if you are like completely nonviolent, you can't be a Christian. You have to be willing to commit some level of violence against sin in order to be a Christian. All right, so we got there, right? Which is fine, right? So the libertarian, your argument is that a Christian libertarian cannot exist. And the reason a Christian libertarian cannot exist is that they conflict. And the conflicts that you gave were the first one, which is a libertarian would, not step in towards someone committing suicide. And that in order to be a Christian, you have to use some level of force to stop someone to be committing suicide.
No, that's not why. No, because libertarians, like you would accept force if it's justified under libertarianism. It's really this, Scott. It's that libertarianism, and you're going to have to tell us what true. Speaking of Scotsman, Scott, is that you're going to have to tell us the true libertarian view, because if I say, from my view, and you can correct me, if I think libertarian is essentially a libertarian view is essentially liberty above all, if I hold that view, and Christianity is virtue and deontology above liberty, it doesn't disavow liberty. It doesn't say no liberty. It says when it comes down to it, when you're in a predicament, your virtue and your moral stance has to supersede the defense of liberty as some sort of highest virtue. So from that view, that's why I reject.
Not a virtue. That's not. Where are you getting that from? I'm just curious.
If a Christian, dude, it's simple. If a Christian, let's just call a virtue something that you hold to morally, ethically in a predicament. If the dilemma is this, either commit an act of aggression virtuously, or don't commit it on the basis of, well, I'm violating my liberty, my rights, or their rights. Okay, this is why I say there's a incompatibility with libertarianism. Libertarianism also allows for all sorts of social indecencies that are totally legal. And that's why it's incompatible as well. That's why it's going to require you, Scott, to say, well, not my libertarianism, but then again, you could get fucking Casimir on and any of the other libertarians to disagree with you, and then they'll be debating.
Yeah. So you're absolutely correct that libertarianism allows for certain social indecencies. Like, let's give an example that actually makes sense. Like prostitution, I think, is a great example, right? Libertarianism says that you can't use, the violence of the state to go and like knock down prostitutes' doors and like put them in jail. Instead, if you don't like prostitutes, then you physically remove them from your property. You don't deal with them. But I'm trying to understand this like, I'm trying to understand the logic here, because I'm not like a super big Christian. I went to Liberty University. I took like some, Bible studies classes or whatever. As a kid, I was raised Catholic, but I'm not a Christian scholar. I'm not a theologian, right? Like my knowledge of Christianity is somewhat sparse here. So I'm trying to ask you, right? Where is the conflict in saying, like, you're saying that Christians have a moral duty and an obligation to use violence and force to ferret out all sin in the world wherever they find it and to constantly search for it? Or are you like, where's the limit there? Like, what's going on?
No one said that.
Well, that would be the
question
logical
was-
conclusion of like
no,
of
it
there being a
wasn't. Not even
contradiction.
close, bro. Not even close. The question is, a libertarian holds a position, right? You have to tell me under your view what we're referring to. If I was wrong in saying libertarianism holds liberty above all, you're gonna have to correct me if that's not true.
Correct. It is not true, right?
Okay,
Libertarianism
what does
doesn't-
libertarian hold then? What's the value of libertarianism then?
it is not a value laden thing. It's not.
It doesn't value
morally
anything. That sounds
prescriptive-
great for society. Yeah, that sounds great.
Right. It is. It's again. It's this is like this aggressively misunderstanding. I've said it over and over
Well,
again.
I just
but it
gave
is
you
a
back your sentence,
descriptive.
dude.
It is a descriptive philosophy that is able to prove that if someone makes the claim that their system is ethical and yet their system is violence inducing, their system is imposing aggression upon other people, that is a performative contradiction. That's not true. That is just not true. You
Scott,
cannot
we're gonna
claim
have to-
your system is
not
ethical
only
when
me-
it does that. That's
not
what
only me-
libertarianism does and says.
not only
It doesn't
me, but the
say
audi-
we permit and these things are great. It doesn't have an opinion on prostitution.
I know. That's why it sucks. Because it doesn't have an opinion. Why? It sucks. You think that's a good thing, right? No, it's not.
No, I
Here's
don't-
why. This is why
no.
you hold on. You just talk for a bit. This is why we call you fence sitting F words, is because this. You guys, we come to a debate about what's better for society. We agree that a functioning society requires some element of force, and that the force is informed by your ideology, and your ideology includes a worldview that includes ethics. I ask you, okay, what does libertarianism value in a debate on what's better for society? And you say it values nothing. It's purely descriptive. That's like saying, what's the study of birds, Scott? I don't know. Someone.
It's like ornithology, I think. or something.
Ornithology. An
be wrong.
ornithologist comes to debate me and goes, "What's better for society, ornithology or Christianity?" I say, "Well, like Christianity, we have a system of oughts, we have a uniform system."
But I didn't.
Hold on. Hold on.
That's a lie.
Hold on.
That's not even the debate topic.
You
It's
said
Christian nationalism versus libertarianism.
It doesn't matter, dude.
Christian nationalism isn't commiserate with libertarianism.
from a
I gave an example of a society that is commiserate with libertarianism,
Fabian,
and you have
Fabian,
yet to attack that as any means of being being bad or as something that isn't preferable. Instead,
Scott.
you keep jumping into this question of ethics and
Scott.
trying to aggressively prove that
Dude,
libertarianism doesn't say the
what's
things
better-
that it doesn't say.
Scott, what's
Duh.
better for society? What's better for society? A system that has ethics or not?
When you you cannot
Answer
there's
the
no
question.
vacuum. No, there's no vacuum. This is a stupid fucking thing.
What's
There's-
better for society? Chat. What's better for society? A system with ethics or a system without ethics?
A system with ethics, obviously.
Great. Get debate over. You admitted
It's
that
not
libertarianism
debate
doesn't
over.
have ethics.
Are you?
Does
you're being
libertarianism
silly.
have ethics?
Stop. I'm going to
Does
have to explain
libertarian-
this. I'm going to have to explain this to you for the
Does
20th.
libertarianism
I hope someone.
have ethics?
I hope
I think
whoever
that
reviews
we should,
this
guys,
debate
just quickly. I think that
should have a counter.
We should have
for how many
Scott-
times you misunderstand
Scott,
us.
We should have Scott quickly try and give it a really concise summary here about the ethics of libertarianism. Does it have an ethical system? Does it have a normative ethical system? And if not, why is that a good thing?
Okay. Yes. So what libertarianism does is it is prescriptive. It is, descriptive. It is not prescriptive. It does not tell you what you ought do. It does not tell you how a good man ought live his life. Okay. It has no opinion on that. That is libertarianism. What it does is it invalidates certain ethical systems that claim that they can violate the non-aggression principle, that claim that it is just that, taxation is a great thing and we can just use the guns and we'll take the money from you. It invalidates certain claims. When a society that can only be good if it is commiserate with libertarianism. It's not possible to be ethically justifiable unless it is commiserate with libertarianism. Because if it is not, then it is a performative contradiction to
Why
attempt
ought
to
we not
justify these
contradict?
things.
Why ought we not contradict then?
Game
over, dude.
Game over.
Game over. No, seriously. Game over.
Because
why ought we not contradict?
What do you mean? How you ask me a question, then you interrupt me with game over.
You're not going to
over and over
answer.
again.
That's why I might as well interrupt. Have another wine.
Because every statement that you make cannot be valid in any form of truth.
Why be valid?
if nothing that you say matters if you accept that contradictions can exist in reality. The moment that you say that A can equal not A, you might as well just be saying
Yeah, why not? Why not do that?
time.
Why not do that?
Well, you're the one that would attempt to justify.
You are.
So you can't
You
justify
do.
a position. That's the thing. Is that again,
I
as I said,
can't.
might doesn't
That's
make
funny.
right, but might does make reality.
Okay, cool. Scott, look, I'll give you a simple syllogism here. Premise one, do you agree or not? A system of ethics for society is better than a system without ethics.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah.
Okay. Premise two, libertarianism doesn't have a system of ethics.
Sure. I might take some issue with a little bit of wording. But
Premise
yeah, it's fine.
Premise three, Christian nationalism has a system of ethics.
Agreed.
Conclusion, Christian nationalism is better for society than libertarianism.
Yeah, well, there's a problem here, right?
What's the
that-
problem?
Right. So I'll do the same thing. I'll give you the exact same. Hold on. I'll give you the
Look at
same
knockdown argument, bro.
Oh my god. So I'll give you the same thing. Write that out and then just replace the word libertarianism with chemistry, and then you'll go, aha, chemistry is invalid.
That's
chemistry
correct.
is invalid.
I would win
because-
that debate too.
No,
Thank
you wouldn't. No, you wouldn't, because libertarianism is not making those claims.
I
You
literally
have to
used
have
that argument
an
with-
ethical system that overlays that. That is why I
literally
gave you
use
an example.
What's the study of birds again?
Ornithology.
I didn't
Google
instead
it.
of using chemistry, Scott, I coincidentally used ornithology. And you know what's funny is that you agree with me that you swap out chemistry or space, fucking engineering or anything. These are all descriptive. When I just brought you through Liberty, Scott, through an absolute brutal fatality of a syllogism that you agree with all the premises and the conclusion of.
The problem is that when I propose libertarianism as a means of invalidating Christian nationalism, that doesn't mean that I'm proposing an ethical framework, right? I did in my opening statement propose a society that has a system of ethics,
What's
and
the
you have
topic-
chosen.
what's- Moderator,
You have
what's
chosen
the topic of the debate and the title of the debate?
libertarianism versus Christian
versus
nationalism.
libertarianism. What's better for society?
Thank you.
Libertarianism is better for society, right?
I just gave you an argument that it's not, and you're like doubling down somehow. How are you doubling down, bro?
It's all.
You want me
like,
to do the argument
it's
again?
silly.
You need me to
No,
write
no,
it in
it's
crayon?
like-
I'll
no,
write it in
it's-
crayon. I have a crayon. I have a crayon.
I do
on
think
my-
that
on
would.
my Procreate.
I do think, jokes aside, right? Like, I almost don't know where to go from here because
I know.
you've just kind of
Yeah,
gone
go away
through
from libertarianism.
You've just kind of like aggressively misunderstood what it is and played
Well, I think
dumb the
maybe
entire debate.
maybe
as a
I
strategy.
can maybe I can move it on a little bit. So Scott, maybe you can give some particular criticisms about the Christian nationalist point of view, and maybe the way that you see that playing out today in terms of different sort of politicians and government structures and voices that are within the sort of alt-right that they call them, etc., and why you think that that's a bad thing, why you think it's negative, and what you think the potential maybe ramifications could be of
Right.
a Christian nationalist system being put in place.
So his definition of Christian nationalism was a very long explanation that essentially is Christians get voted into office. Right. And if that's the definition that we're going with, that Christian nationalism is the exact same thing that we currently have, just with Christians in office, my critiques would be more, just a matter of the state, right? Like taxation is a problem. The fact that over 50% of our wealth is stolen from us so that we can divert funds.
Oh,
over
stealing's
to,
wrong now?
Stealing's always been wrong.
From a libertarian perspective that has no ethical
Yes.
system? Interesting. How is that the case?
What do you mean? How is that the case?
How is stealing wrong from a
Why are you
libertarian perspective,
jumping,
bro?
Like the moderator just stepped in, right? So that we could re-engage. Hold on, Jesus Christ, Jimbob. So that we could re-engage in.
Christ is risen.
Yeah, I do want to go down this path, Scott. So
Right.
Jimbob,
He's just like, I'm going
Yeah.
back into it. I've explained it to you like 20 times. The
Smuggle
fact that
a
you
bunch of
pretend to
shit.
not understand it, right, is
Oh, I
just
understand
silly.
it, dude. I'm listening. I'm actually the one listening to you. You're not listening to you.
I particularly want to
I
get
am listening
into
to
Scott how you think it actually plays out in the current context like rather than historical examples in the current context, why you think that's a yep.
Right. So I gave an example of, comparing the two systems that I propose in my opening statement. But if we're just looking just at the current system and the idea that Christian nationalism is not one that imposes Christian values on people, and Christian symbols and things that you would traditionally associate with Christian nationalism, and doesn't have anything to do with the nation being a national identity, which is kind of the nationalism part of that. But instead, if the discussion is just we vote in Christians and Christians govern based upon, informed of their Christian values, I would say that if they were libertarian, that would be just fine. But he said that they can't be libertarian, right? And so when we went down that road, the question is the moments in which Christianity, would require the politicians to impose their will in situations where people aren't violating the non-aggression principle, right? So the reason I have issues with that are multitudinous. Let's use prostitution as an example. It's what I used before, right? When a nation state tries to impose will on people that don't want to follow whatever rules it is that they are, especially when they're nonviolent, you create this massive black market. We've seen this with the war on drugs, for example. We have spent hundreds of billions of dollars now fighting the war on drugs, and drug usage has not gone down in any way, shape, or form, right? I don't want to waste all of my money on programs that don't work just because people think that it's just to steal money from me to stop people from doing drugs. Now, that doesn't mean I like drugs. That doesn't mean I want drugs in my community. In fact, what I would say is, if we were able to come towards libertarianism, where people are able to police their own private property, we could actually remove drugs and druggies and things of that nature out of our property and let the druggies go fucking kill themselves somewhere else, away from my children, away from my family. And so this is just like one example of the failures of Jimbob, supporting the socialist state because he's a socialist, and then just calling it Christian nationalism because he voted for Christians.
What? That is one of the most bad faith things I've ever heard in a debate against myself. I'm a socialist.
You should listen. You're a socialist.
How am I a socialist?
You're a socialist because you believe that the free market and that voluntary transactions from people has contradictions, and that those contradictions.
When did I say that?
Well, you didn't say that, but that is the.
Then why are you lying? You little sneak.
I'm not lying.
Don't be a liar.
I'm not lying by
liar in the
what
chat. We got a liar in the chat.
I think you're losing so bad you can't stop interrupting and memeing.
You just admitted you lied. You made shit up.
I didn't.
Why would you make
I
something
didn't
up? Why would I trust a libertarian like you? You make shit up about people. I never said anything.
I don't think you're being serious at this point. I think you're being a toddler again.
Hold on just a second. So in terms of the socialism claim, I think
it makes right wingers mad. Yeah, I get it.
When you lie about them, yeah, it should.
No, you're a socialist.
What you're? Hold on a second, guys. Hold on, guys. Mod is talking. Okay, silence. So, I think that what you're trying to say there, Scott, maybe is that he disagrees with the ideas of free markets, and that he disagrees with the principles of free markets, and that's why you would consider him a socialist. Would that be about right? Yeah,
I would say that when a socialist, there's a lot of definitions for socialism, right? The original one would be against the monarchy, right? Yeah, I know. I know. It's so
just
annoying
answer the
when
question, dude. He asked you a direct question, dude. Just say yes or no.
I did. I said yes, and then I started giving context.
Okay, I'm not against free market and exchanges. I have my ethical system would put limits on what you can exchange and what the transactions are from a deontological perspective. What?
So you're against them. You're against free markets. You just said that.
You just said
I'm for the free market.
People.
No, you literally just said.
You watch basketball? You hate black people.
I know that when you're losing, you keep interrupting people and making jokes, right? But you just said that you're for free market and that it's great and
with a limitation.
That I'm wrong. And then you said, but with limitations.
That doesn't.
What the fuck is the free market with regulations and limitations?
That is the most uncharitable approach that you could ever take. I'm glad that you're showing people how uncharitable you are.
How am I uncharitable when you say I am for the free market, but also I'm for regulating it and it not being the free market?
I'll show you, Scott. Are you for a free movement? of people?
Free movement of people? No, absolutely not.
So people can't freely move from place to place throughout the country, go visit a mountain, go hiking?
No, I'm not for free movement. Free movement can violate people's property rights.
Okay, so you're against people visiting their family, of course. You think people you hate family.
The two are disanalogous.
See how that works?
The free market.
You hate people's family.
The free market presupposes that all transactions, that all voluntary transactions that are allowed, right? Like they're voluntary transactions that are not aggressive or not fraudulent, right? You're saying I'm for that thing, but with exceptions, is saying that you're not for that thing. You're not for the free market. You're for a mixed market economy. And a mixed market economy is part socialist
I agree.
and part capitalist.
Fair enough. Okay, fair enough. What you referred to as free, I was ignorant to what free market means in your paradigm. Fair enough. I believe that there is some liberty with people engaging in commerce and trade, and then there's some limitation we have to enforce in regards to certain behaviors and certain transactions. You also agree prostitution is one of those things that you combat, right? It doesn't violate anyone's rights. It doesn't violate anyone's property. And here we go. We agree that maybe we should we should crack down on that, or I don't know what extent you're taking that position, but from that position, we're both against free markets, right?
No, because I wouldn't use coercion and violence to stop prostitution. I would remove them from my property.
Coercion? What? You won't
remove them from my property.
So wait, if a prostitute is just outside your property and there's 20 of them and you have a kid and the kid plays in the yard and they're nearly naked, right? They're not naked, but their ass is hanging out. They're saying things like, come fuck this pussy, bitch, like that, right? You're not going to say, you're not going to be in a society. You don't advocate for a society that actually forcefully removes them from the sidewalk, right?
I would absolutely advocate for a society
so you would
that
use
removes
force.
them.
Okay, cool.
Well, so you already admitted earlier in the debate.
You're not open for free market then.
You admitted earlier in the debate that if someone puts up a no trespassing sign that says violators will be shot, that is not coercion, right? You already admitted this. You understand that it is not coercive or against free market principles for people to have the right to freely associate with people that share their values in a community and excise those people that want to come onto their property that don't.
Let me clarify this one more time. Absent a state, a consolidated body of force and justice, right? That attempts to standardize the process of justice and it's the application of force. Without that, right, you don't have a coercive thing where there's a sign, right? That's not coercion. What I'm saying is that once you have a body that with a gun says, we're going to regulate this, we're going to decide if Scott's in the right or not. I'm saying that's coercive and I'm all for it.
So you think hiring security for my fence would be coercive? Would that be coercive?
To hire security for your fence?
Well, I'm trying to figure out where the jump from non-coercion to coercion exists, right? So the next step would be like I hire private security to go on my property.
I just told you. If there's no state,
why are you running from the question? Right? I'm telling
you. I'm literally telling you where.
No, you're repeating a state.
You just asked, Scott, where's the threshold of where something's coercive and not coercive, right? In the example, I just told you the threshold is when you deploy a standardized system, a state that then arbitrates whether you are in the right. So if you hire a bunch of people to protect your property, if there's no state, someone else lives near you with more guns could actually attempt to take over your property, right? Now, without a state to arbitrate whether it is just or not, the only just thing in the libertarian worldview is who had the stronger force and the will to take over your house. And if you were able to defend, if you were able
don't
to
prescribe to me my beliefs.
Stop interrupting. If you were able to defend it, you're in the right without a state, without any arbitration or mediator of what's just, what's not just, no law. Okay. The person who aggresses you, if they have superior force, if it's just for you to defend it with no arbitration, then it's just for them to take it with no arbitration.
By what means do you make that argument?
By
that's what
force.
Libertarians believe.
Well, what I asked you many times throughout the debate, what else are you appealing to as the normative authority?
The question I answered a bunch of times.
You can't
just
answer.
aggressively
No, you said it
misunderstood.
depends. No, you said it depends.
So I'm going to go through this. So, we can try and so you're saying it must be a state. So absent the state, there is no coercion?
There's never an absence of state because the state is necessitated. The moment three people with guns say, you know what? I have an idea of how things should be run, and I'm going to try to do it. And then you, Scott, the libertarian, right, will say, well, they're doing this thing over there. It's awful state-like. We either submit, negotiate, or we fight, right? There's three options.
So let's go to the question you wanted to run away from. All right. So I have my property. I have my property. I have my property. Okay. And then there is a person that wants to trespass on my property. And then I decide I want to hire a third person because you said once we have three people, we have a state.
Is this with a state or not? Sorry,
there are no other humans in the world.
Okay.
There are no other humans in the world.
I need a clarification though, Scott. When you say property without a legal term, I'm asking, what does that mean? Other than land or objects that you temporarily.
If we ever debate again, I need you to read some libertarian theory to understand this.
Just fucking answer the question, dude.
I have said multiple times that we're talking about natural law, right? And that it is descriptive. Property is scarce resources. That's it. We're talking about scarce resources. Okay. Anytime there's any scarce
what makes
resource,
it yours?
What makes the scarce
without
resource mine?
Without state, what makes the resources yours in this example, please?
The first user principle.
Okay, and the second user, they're now the first user? If they take it from you?
The first user would have to transfer that property to the second user.
By loss of battle.
No.
Why not, dude? Why not, dude?
Because you ask, because then it invalidates the concept of private property. If anyone that has guns can take it and then justifiably own it, then it's not private property, right? It's just might makes right. And then your argument is ethics and morality don't matter because might makes right. You're saying
Fabian,
there are no rights and there is no right
for the
or wrong,
audience,
so long as I have the guns to do it.
Pretend you're teaching a libertarian class, right? Let's say me and the entire audience doesn't understand this concept. Absent a state. Why are you
appealing to the audience instead of debating me?
Because they're part of the debate, and that's what a good entertainer does. You should learn.
I know that you're an entertainer more than a debater tonight.
Are you? Well, I'm kind of doing good at both here. So look, Scott, if under the libertarian view, without a state, what you call property is merely space you occupy or objects you have in your possession, right? On the principle that you found them or you made them or whatever else, right? Your ability and willfulness to defend yourself in those things using force is what maintains that they're still your property, right? Nothing else.
No, they're my property even if someone steals it.
How?
I mean, just because someone else has possession of my property.
I asked how.
I've explained. I will explain again. Right? So if you're, stop interrupting every time you ask a question. You ask a question, then I start to answer the question. Then you say you're not going to answer. Right? If you're not here for a debate, like if you keep interrupting someone and you keep saying you're not going to answer the question,
what's my question?
So therefore,
please?
I'm going to answer for you.
What's my question?
You're asking me what makes it my property once it becomes the possession of someone else. Correct?
Yep.
Okay. What makes it my property is that I am the only one that has a justifiable claim to that property. The other person
just circular. It's my property because it's my property. Try again, please.
It's not my property because it's my property. It is my property because no one else has a justifiable claim to the property. If I go and I steal your guitar, if I go and I take your guitar, is it now my property or is it your property? Whichever one, the one,
without a state,
do you have an Ibanez? I take your Ibanez.
Without a state, it's yours.
Okay.
And so when I ask you, when I ask you this question, what makes it your property? You said I have a justifiable claim, and I'm asking, what makes it justifiable other than force?
Would you like me to answer?
Yeah.
Or am I not going to answer? All right, there we go. So what makes it justifiable other than force is that I have the first user principle, and relax. If your system, I do. Come on. So if you have an ethical framework and you are attempting to justify that ethic cannot be a conflict-inducing system. Otherwise, it's no longer ethics. If your system necessitates introducing conflict and aggression, then it's not ethics because it's not conflict reducing. It's conflict inducing. The only justifiable system of ethics is one that reduces and resolves conflict, not one that initiates and creates conflict.
Wait a second. Isn't force and violence conflict resolution?
It is. It is. You're absolutely right. It resolves the
that's
conflict
a problem with
that you induced. No, it isn't.
No,
you're
dude.
You're searching for gotchas instead of actually engaging.
Look. You just argued.
It induces conflict.
Dude, let me answer. You just argued that what makes conflict resolution, what makes this other option good is that it's conflict resolution. And I just said, isn't violence conflict resolution critical path? You say yes, and you giggle as if I didn't just give one count. Hold on, one counter
resolves
example.
the conflict that you created.
So does conflict.
Thus, it's conflict inducing.
Who cares if it resolves the conflict? If shooting someone resolves the conflict from a libertarian perspective, what's the value other than avoiding conflict? I mean, I don't understand what you're saying.
If you have an ethical system, right, you have to have, in order to have an ethical framework, you need 3 people. You can't have 2 people, right? Because you could just kill the other person and then there's no other people. So with the third person, you're creating or justifying a system of ethics. And so when you're justifying that system of ethics, you're saying our society ought live by these rules to resolve conflict, and to be a morally good society, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. These are the rules that we put forward. Now, if your system induces conflict, it ceases to be ethics. It ceases to be an ethical system. You're claiming that your system can be ethical whilst also being the very thing that makes it not ethics, which is that it initiates conflict.
Are rights ethical? A society with rights, is that ethical?
Well,
that acknowledges rights?
It depends on what that society means by rights.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, rights, like property rights. Is a society, from your view,
property rights
that acknowledges rights?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if I don't believe in rights, and yet the threat of force, right, an arm of government that imposes the belief on me, how is that not the initiation of force? It says, Jimbob, it says, Jimbob, you will acknowledge rights or else. How is that not force initiation?
So if the society is invading your property and coming after you because you stop acting like a toddler, just listen for a second, relax.
Just answer my question.
I am answering your question. Not every fucking question is a yes or a no, dude. So if the society is coming after you because you don't believe in rights, then that is unethical. If they are simply engaging in thought crime against you, that is unethical. But if the reason they're coming after you is not that you don't believe in rights, you're perfectly free to not believe in rights. The problem comes when you initiate conflict against someone else's body or their property, then someone comes to stop you, right? That's not an imposition against you.
If I point a gun at you, a gun at you, I don't use the gun other than pointing it at you, and I say, behave like X or else. Is that use of aggression and force?
That's a threat. You're obviously imposing a threat against me.
Okay, so when a government decides that rights exist and they point a figurative and actual gun at society and say, even though you don't believe in my beliefs of rights existing, I'm pointing a gun at you to say, if you don't acknowledge and behave accordingly to my beliefs with a gun, I'm going to aggress you. How is that not aggression based on the same exact standard?
The reason they're disanalogous, I will answer, right? Like I'm literally saying the reason they will, and then you interrupt me to go, how? Probably the rest of my sentence, dude. So the reason they're disanalogous is that there's a substantive difference between saying a few different things, right? So if a government is saying, if you aggress upon another person, I will stop you, that you are the initiator of the aggression, not the government in question. Now, obviously, taxation, other things that most governments do would be an act of aggression, and that's why I'm an anarchist. But there is also another problem here, which is you're comparing in the future, if you become the aggressor, I will... this person that is now stopped from arguing their own rights, right? They have become the aggressor. Is very different than taking a loaded firearm and pointing the loaded firearm at a person. When you point a loaded firearm at a person, that person has become an aggressor in that situation, versus some body somewhere, some body of people or some individual saying, if you aggress upon other people, we will come and stop you, or we will come and, take the property that you stole.
Okay, cool. Okay, Scott. So if I walk into your house, you don't know me, and I tell you I have a gun and you believe me, I'm not pointing a gun at you. Am I using force?
Well, yeah, you've already broken into my house.
No, let's say I don't. Okay, forget that part. I'm in the middle of a public area, right? And I go up to you and I convince you that I have a firearm. You believe me and you give me your wallet. Is that equivalent to pointing the gun at you?
I mean, it depends on how you convince me. But if you convince me by threatening me, right, then yeah.
I'm going to shoot you. I have a gun. You can't see it, right? You believe me.
You've aggressed upon me, obviously.
Yeah. So how is that different? That's a microcosm of the government. If you don't acknowledge and behave as though the rights exist, even though you don't believe in them, I'm enforcing my beliefs on you. And if you don't abide by them behaviorally, I will use the gun on you. How is it different, dude?
The difference is when someone is an aggressor, right, and they are stopped from arguing their own rights, right? So for example, let's say you drink and drive a lot. I'm not saying you do. Let's say the amorphous one drinks and drives a lot, and then they get arrested for a DUI, okay, and they get charged and convicted with a DUI, and then later on they get their license back and they start drinking and driving again, and they go to court, and then they attempt to argue, I've never drank and drive a day in my life. Under common law theory, right, we understand that they are stopped from being able to argue that they do not drink and drive and that they've never done it before, because they've already been convicted in a court of law that they're drinking and driving. So that is an estoppel principle in common law. As it applies to libertarian framework, is that when you steal my TV, right, you break into my house and you steal my TV, you are stopped from arguing, well, hold on, I have the right to bodily autonomy. You can't violate me. You can't aggress upon me. And the reason is that you've already proven with your actions that you yourself are an aggressor, that you break into people's houses and you steal their TV. You're saying, I live by the law of the jungle. I don't believe in rights, and I am not arguing for them. No matter how much you say that you believe in rights, it doesn't matter. And until you pay me restitution for the crime, until I get the value of that TV back, and whatever property damage you did, and potentially money it took to track you down and find you, until you do all of that, you are stopped from arguing for your own rights. That is why the aggressor can have violence used against them and it not be an act of aggression to use violence against them. It's completely different than you walking up to a stranger on the street and saying, I'm going to shoot you if you... Yeah, sometimes concepts are complicated and they need to be explained.
Scott,
I'm almost done. It's very different.
You're almost done. Wow, oh my God.
It's very different than you saying, going up to a stranger that has not done anything to you and hasn't been proven to have done anything wrong, and saying, give me your money or else I have a gun.
Okay, so the aggressor in your example, based on my question, is the one who doesn't believe in rights. So you saying my house, legal term or philosophical? If it's legal, you're making my argument for me that you've necessitated an arm of a body of force that you, from your own perspective in this debate, said was illegitimate.
What? No.
The state is illegitimate from your view.
No.
Yes.
The state is illegitimate. That doesn't mean that my ability to own property isn't something that I can descriptively say is true. I've already answered that question.
I don't want to loop. I just want to. Okay, no looping, but I just want to summarize for the audience that when it comes to ownership, house, property, things, okay, Scott says, in the absence of the state to arbitrate whether it is your property or not, legally or not, it's philosophically yours. And I ask, what's the justification? He says, the justifying principle is that I found it first, or I got it first come, first serve. I found it on the playground. It's mine. Okay. So from that view, I ask, well, why should anyone value that under a libertarian principle? All right. You're just claiming it's yours. Someone who can come along, the aggressor, and say, you know what? I have an interesting principle that sounds a lot like yours, Scott, except it's called second. It's a principle of secondary ownership. I actually value owning things secondly, not firstly. Like I actually go out there with my warlord friends with our guns, and we only find property and items that are first owned, and we want the second. We don't want the third, and we don't want the first. We want the second. We value that. That's our principle. So here we go, warlord Jimbob versus Scott the Libertarian. I say, Scott, that's interesting. I have more firepower than you, and I actually abide by the principle of the second ownership principle. And you say, well, that's crazy. I abide by the first. And I go, well, I guess who's going to win? I guess how do we decide who's going to win? I ask you straight point blank, Scott. The only answer to this question is force.
Yeah, I've said over and over again in this debate that might doesn't make right, but it does make reality. That like if people are willing to impose violence against other people, that doesn't magically make it wrong. Like if I let's say we're absent a state, right? We're absent any any governing body. We're on a deserted island somewhere that no state has laid claim to, and I rape you. Would that be wrong or would that be right? I just
from a Christian view, it'd be wrong, but from a libertarian view, I don't know how you could actually. You admitted you don't have any ethical standards.
Right. Again. So
Again.
you would say it's wrong. So why is it wrong to rape you?
From a Christian lens or from a libertarian lens?
From your own lens, whatever lens you so choose.
Well, I would say
why is it wrong to rape you?
I would say it's a perversion of the function and the context for sex under a Christian paradigm, for one. Especially if it was male on male, which you're saying you're doing that to me. It's not even sex. So you're just doing some sort of weird sodomy move. That's a perversion of the thing that you're really designed to do. So there would be a Christian element to even examining what's going on, let alone whether it's wrong or not. But from a libertarian perspective, absent the state, that's just someone using force. And they could actually say, hey, Fabian, I actually don't hold that humans are different than objects. There's no dignity, which is another problem with libertarianism. They don't have any metaphysics. Hold on, don't laugh.
Oh no, I'm laughing. No, I am going to interrupt. I'm going to interrupt because you've given like three examples. No, you've given like three examples. No, I'm going to interrupt because this is becoming nonsense. Right? I do want this. I do want this. So this is no. So I'll let you finish. I'll let you finish, but I got to interrupt the Kish Couch.
Hold on a sec. I think we should just let Jimbob land the plane on the point that he was making.
He's not landing the plane. That's a Gish Gallop, right? Like when he makes multiple arguments about what libertarians believe.
I'll tell you.
Right? When there's a libertarian here, it becomes silly.
Okay. Land the plane.
Well, you've already made two other arguments, so I'll have to have like a half an hour or something.
Let me finish. In this hypothetical, I let you finish. So, look. The point is, if a libertarian looks as a human being as an object and he uses the first principle, right? If you use your own philosophy and just eliminated that humans have dignity or anything, hold on. I could just take over you. You could take over someone and call them an object and say, oh, I lay first come, first serve principle. Now the libertarian has a massive problem in their metaphysics because you don't even have a justification for why humans have dignity such that they shouldn't be aggressed or seen as objects.
Okay, so you made a bunch of claims about libertarianism, despite we talking about it, that are just like patently absurd, right? So first of all, we'll work backwards, right? So obviously humans aren't objects. Humans have a right to bodily I know it's not obvious to someone whose debate tactic is to just aggressively misunderstand and interrupt constantly. Yes, I just interrupted you because you were gish galloping. So the last one. You say that humans are objects. That's according to libertarianism and the first user principle. You're just regurgitating the words I'm saying without actually saying anything of meaning. That's not true, obviously.
Cool. Let's start with that.
No, hold on. One thing I know.
One thing at a time.
No, I'm going to go through all of the false things you said because that's how you defend against a gish gallop, right? When people argue in bad faith like you do. So again, when it is not true that humans are objects because the first user principle derives from the concept of bodily autonomy under argumentation ethics as an entity that is in control of their own body and has exclusive control over their own body. That is the libertarian position. You could disagree with that. That's fine. That's up for debate because obviously
it doesn't follow. It doesn't follow you ought to value others' autonomy, dude. That's a jump. Nope. You don't get that one. Go ahead.
No, I didn't say that. What you said is that I could look at them as an object and not as a being under the libertarian framework, and that's just simply not true. You don't
Why
even.
not?
You were
Just saying that, dude, Scott, just saying it's not
You're
true.
going-
Look, I'll make it simple for you.
Shush.
If I
David
say I have
Gishkel,
autonomy,
I have to go through these things, right?
If I say I have autonomy, it doesn't follow that other people should value.
You're
No,
making
dude.
claims. You're making claims about what libertarianism is by just saying.
I'm
the
calling
same
you out on
words.
your own reasoning, dude. That's what a
my
debate
own
is.
reasoning does. My own
It's flawed.
okay. Well, my own reasoning is not flawed when
Yeah, it is.
you make when you. Oh my god.
All right, let him land the plane, Jimbob. Scott, land the plane. Then we're going to go to closing soon, guys, as well.
The other aspect that you said is that libertarianism has no capacity to be able to say whether or not something is right or wrong in terms of, and that only the Christian ethic here in this example has that. But again, as I've stated multiple times throughout this debate, it comes down not to when the person says this is right or wrong, but when they attempt to justify a claim. That once you attempt to claim that something is right to a third party, that is when it becomes invalidated by the actions. You cannot say that it is right to rape someone or that it is right to aggress upon someone without being engaged in a performative contradiction, because you're establishing the moral norm by argumentation.
You just contradicted
itself.
yourself. You
Sure
just said,
thing, man. Point out
why-
the contradiction.
Scott, here's the contradiction. You just said you can't declare X is wrong, declare it on the third party because it's a contradiction, because you're assuming something against their autonomy or something like this. When you're assuming your own autonomy, you're basically making this like reflective view that like if you assume it for yourself, you need to assume it for other people. Not only is that does not logically follow, but I'll just grant it for the sake of argument. What you just did is you assumed from your view.
Why does that? Hold on, why does that not logically follow?
Because if you say I have bodily autonomy, that's a descriptive claim, right?
Yes.
It doesn't follow that you ought not violate someone's bodily autonomy just descriptively.
Well, again, it comes down to when you attempt to justify it. You're establishing an ethical norm by saying I ought not be if you say I believe in taxes, I believe murder is okay, right? The performative contradiction comes in when you're attempting to justify that to a third party while at the same time establishing the norm of argumentation.
There's no contradiction between these two statements, Scott. I value my own bodily autonomy. I value violating other people's bodily autonomy. There's no contradiction.
It's a performative contradiction.
No, it's not.
By Habermas, right? You're establishing.
No, I value my bodily autonomy.
Yes, right.
I didn't say humans.
No. The performative action of the contradiction, right? It's not specifically in the words. Do you know what a performative contradiction is, right?
Yes, it's when the action actually violates. But in premise one, if I say I value my autonomy and I violate someone else's, I didn't devalue my autonomy. I use my autonomy to violate someone's autonomy. It's not a performative contradiction, dude.
Right. When you say I value my own autonomy, right? And then you say that I value the performative contradiction isn't in the first statement. The performative contradiction occurs in the second statement. And the second statement is that I value violating other people's bodily autonomy.
What's the contradiction?
When the performative contradiction is that you are establishing the norm whilst arguing to justify your position. So when you are arguing with the other person, saying to violate other people's rights, you are establishing a norm via argumentation that you have the moral preference of utilizing argumentation and recognizing their bodily autonomy as an individual that you're engaged in argumentation with.
No, Scott, you'd be correct if the first premise was I value bodily autonomy universally.
No,
I don't say that.
That's not what I'm saying. The first statement is irrelevant.
That's the only way it works.
You can throw it out. You can throw out the first statement. It's just the second statement that matters.
What's P then? What's P and not P then in the second statement?
When we are talking a performative contradiction, the two things that are contradicting, right? The P and not P. The not P is the the action of engaging in argumentation with another person and establishing an ethical norm that recognizes their bodily autonomy. By engaging in good faith argumentation, you have recognized their bodily autonomy and established the moral preference for argumentation over other forms of coercion and violence.
I got
and
it.
then
Okay.
the
Just a
statement
thing.
that is contradicting is
okay, cool. I'm a mute. I'm a mute. I'm a mime. I don't make any arguments. I just violate bodily autonomy. Is that good?
Yeah, you're just a crazy person. You can't. You're
Oh,
saying
there you
if you
go.
can't
There you go.
type, if you can't type
There
and
you
you
go.
can't sign,
You
and
get-
you
you heard
can't
it here
speak,
first,
then
guys.
you're not attempting to.
Guys,
You've never
as long
attempted to
as there's a
justify your
silent-
ethics.
Okay, as long as there's a silent,
not what that means.
Dude, as long as there's a silent group of warlords who don't make arguments, then it's not a contradiction to completely take over the world by force.
Correct.
All right,
Absolutely.
fellas.
They are a threat to everyone, and we should kill them. They're not attempting to say that their ethics are valid. They're just going around aggressing. Yes. Kill those people.
Wait, you say should?
Yes, I said should.
I thought you were arguing for a libertarian framework, which you admitted in this debate has no oughts.
No, I'm a human. That doesn't mean all of my opinions are libertarian. What are you talking about?
Well, aren't you arguing tonight from a libertarian perspective?
So you're saying if that's okay. If we were debating math, we would have to use narrative language. That doesn't. If we were debating math, that doesn't mean we're not allowed to use the English language because we're debating some concept in math, right? I said that we should do that. That doesn't mean that that necessarily comes from libertarianism. That comes from other beliefs that I hold.
Okay, but are you saying that libertarianism, as you present it tonight, is insufficient without additional worldviews to add to it?
I've said that since the fucking very beginning.
Okay, so do you concede that libertarianism measured against Christian nationalism would require something additional to libertarianism to argue against Christian nationalism? Ethically speaking.
That was literally my fucking opening statement, my guy.
So
That's why I said
libertarianism-
this is what Christians should do. They should engage in a voluntary society because that doesn't contradict
watch
itself,
this. Okay,
unlike
watch this.
Christian nationalism.
Okay. Is there a type of Christian nationalism that, if paired with libertarianism, would defeat another version of Christian nationalism?
Well, your definition of Christian nationalism is just voting in Christians, and it doesn't have anything to do with nationalism or Christian nationalism.
Why not?
As like
What
we
are you talking about?
mostly understand it.
Oh yeah, no, I mean
so-
in the sense that like
if
that-
you voted in Christians that were libertarians, right, then it would be better than voting in Christians that aren't libertarians. So that would be, by your definition, two different types of Christian nationalism, and one would be commensurate with libertarianism, one wouldn't. So obviously that one would be superior.
Well, I just, I guess I assume, Jake, we're coming in on time, but I just wanted to say that the key point of this is really simple, and I put it in a syllogism, and I want to say it again in case people were late, is that if premise one is a worldview with an ethical paradigm is better for society than one that doesn't have one, if that's true, and premise two is Christian nationalism has an ethical paradigm, and premise three is libertarianism doesn't have an ethical paradigm, it actually follows in the conclusion that Christian nationalism, even given Scott's abrasive attempts to attack it, is still logically following the syllogism better and superior than libertarianism. And by Scott's own admission, for libertarianism itself to defeat Christian nationalism, he actually has to adopt something additional that's not exactly libertarianism. So I think it's the case that no matter what Scott is debating against, if he holds a view, if the prompt is what's better for society, I think, Scott, you basically have to stop arguing from just a libertarian. You're going to have to like tie it to something, because from your own admission, yeah, but that's not libertarianism. That's adding something to it. So it's like, it's not really the debate topic. It's like libertarianism is insufficient. You agree, I agree, but you need to borrow from some Christian lens or some other lens, tie it to libertarianism, deal with its, sort of peripheral inconsistencies. But ultimately, if the debate is Christian nationalism versus libertarianism, Christian nationalism is still superior and better for society than a system that doesn't even have a count for what better for society means.
All right,
Doesn't even
fellas,
have an
quickly, Scott, you can respond to that. Then we're going to go into closing statements where Jimbob will have the last word. So, maybe Scott might be.
Yeah,
a
I'll
good
just
time
go into
now
my
actually
closing
to do
statement.
that.
He kind of just
Yeah,
gave
yeah.
a closing statement, but it's fine. I'll just go into the closing statements. So, in the beginning of this debate, I, showcased a system that is commiserate with libertarianism, and compared it to Christian nationalism. Obviously, Jimbob, gave a very vague definition of what Christian nationalism is, which is any nation state or any form of government that has Christians in it is now Christian nationalism, as opposed to what most people understand Christian nationalism to be. Nevertheless, I am against the state. I am against aggression. I am against the system of theft and murder. I don't know why a Christian would be pro-theft and murder, but that's what Christian nationalism is imposing the will. I really wanted to have a conversation about what is better for society, as opposed to getting bogged down into like this weird ethical, conundrums of, going over, let me do this syllogism, let me do that syllogism, and I feel like I probably did make one mistake, which is, not really truly forcing the idea of what do you mean, Jimbob, by what is better for society, right? And that would probably would have been good, and maybe he'll address it in the closing. That would be fun, and the Q&As. Nevertheless, this debate was mostly about misunderstanding of what libertarianism is. And what libertarianism is a descriptive philosophy on natural law. And it is able to invalidate ethical systems that attempt to justify themselves as good and as valid by logic, by reason. And so what is best for society can only be ethical systems that are commiserate with libertarianism. And the one that I gave and put forward for devout Christians that would be far better than Christian nationalism is a voluntary anarcho-capitalist framed Christian monarchy where people are able to voluntarily join a kingdom and swear fealty, where they do not have the problems that a nation state has, where they do not have the issue of trying to police non-believers, and instead they can live a Christian cultural homogenous society, as opposed to one that tries to use coercion and force to keep evil amongst them and to compromise with evil and to constantly be involved with that corruption and be in the situation where the iron law of oligarchy presents itself. Unfortunately, it seems like there is confusion on understanding this apples to oranges comparison. It is true that libertarianism, does not make moral claims about different things. Instead, it is the experiment that was America of federalism to its extreme degree, which is 1,000 Liechtensteins, right? And we will see which societies fail because they do not have, a good moral foundation. And we will, battle and compete for those most prosperous, most free societies to be able to really move us into a progress in the future, as opposed to being held down by an autocracy that is full of nothing but corruption and sin, which is what Jimbob wants.
All right, well, guys, we've got a poll up in the chat at the moment that is what is better for society, Christian nationalism, libertarianism, and I'm still not sure. So if you guys haven't put your vote in, you're going to have another 5, maybe 10 minutes or so. We might keep it up there for a little bit during the super chats. But make sure you head to the chat, put your vote in, what you think is better for society, so that we can see how the opinions have changed from start to finish. And also, guys, we're going to go into super chats after that. So we're 32 out of 50. Where hopefully we can hit that goal, and then we will read out all the questions and super chats straight after Jimbob's closing statement. So Jimbob, go for it.
All right, thanks. So the one thing I wanted to focus in on, which I did throughout the debate, is, Scott mentions, well, he used the term non-believers. I used the example of not believing in rights and how you couldn't possibly, from a libertarian perspective, not appeal to rights, liberty, property. These are things, if someone doesn't believe, I got it out of Scott that he actually does agree that you're going to need some type of force applicator to enforce the violation of things like rights. For non-believers, when someone goes out in the world and does something, consider them a non-believer of the doctrine of rights, okay? I don't think it's any different on principle than sin. Swap rights with sin. You don't believe in sin? Well, we're still going to enforce it. Sorry, I don't care if you don't believe in rights. I don't care if you don't believe in sin. It's not really a big difference. Secondly, if we got into it, it would have been even worse for Scott, believe it or not, if you can imagine it. That if we got into duties and obligations, not only does libertarianism not have a system of ethics and moral code, it doesn't have any obligations to do anything. So a Christian view prioritizes, propagandizes, incentivizes the family to have children, to stay married. These are all pressured, in your face, invasive. That's what I would advocate for. The fact that Christian ethics is tied to deontology, tied to duties and moral obligations, that those are shared between people uniformly, that there's cohesion. Is social cohesion and ethical cohesion better than none? Yes. Does Christianity, even a Christian nationalist view, have cohesive, in-group, shared ethical principles and norms? Yes. Does libertarian? No. It's just don't touch my stuff, generally speaking. It says nothing about procreating. It says nothing about marriage. It says nothing about degeneracy. It says nothing about keeping the home unit together. It says nothing about anything. It's just descriptive. I could have debated a chemist tonight, and they're just talking about descriptive claims about the periodic table of elements and how to boil things and make explosions. And the question would be just the same. What's better for society, describing things or advocating and using force to implement coercively or non-coercively, just social pressure? What's better for society? Well, Christianity is better for society. Why? Because society is made up of people, and people need to be made, and Christianity makes people. Libertarianism doesn't have an obligation to make people. There's no obligation. You can't go up to a libertarian and say, you're not being a really consistent libertarian here. You're not having kids. You can't say that. You can't even pressure people about libertarianism. It's kind of like, do as thou wilt, which is ultimately satanic, and don't bother other people as long as they don't bother you. Well, that's not what makes a good society. In fact, that makes a splintered, isolated society of depressed people who are stuck in an endless loop of pornography and depression. And there's no community building with libertarianism either. I mean, these things, I wish we got into it. If Scott's arguments weren't so atrocious, I wish we could have gotten into the obligatory aspect comparatively between Christianity and libertarianism, but we didn't. My call to action for the guests, if you're in your libertarian phase, I recommend abandoning it. It's beautiful. Pursue Orthodox Christianity. It not only is descriptively beautiful about reality, it describes reality better than libertarianism, and it actually offers you a participatory road to your own happiness, your own sense of liberty from your sin, not liberty from the government, liberty from sin, and so forth. I won't preach anymore. I'm going to play the violin music. Again, no hard feelings with Scott. I really appreciate you coming on and battling this out. And Jake, for having us. I hope you do a lot more debates, okay?
All right. Well,
and for the Christians that are all here, because I know most of your audience is Christian, happy Good Friday.
Awesome. Cool. All right, fellas. Well, let me just quickly get into the results of the poll here. So the first one is what's better for society, Christianity, Christian nationalism, I'm not sure, and libertarianism. Christian nationalism came in at 82%, libertarianism came in at 7%, and I'm not sure at 9%. And the second one, Christian nationalism, came in at 85%, libertarianism still at 7%, and I'm not sure 7%. So it looks like Jimbob managed to pull a few people over from the middle. Going to go through a few super chats now from our fantastic audience. And if you guys want to respond to this, we'll just keep it really sort of short and sharp. Even Lord for $5 said, Chinese communism is preferable to libertarian degenerate society. Libertarianism is a joke. Anarchy is a joke. And mob rule is pure foolishness. Any response to that, Fabian?
Well, obviously, I wouldn't say that Chinese communism is preferable to libertarianism, but a libertarian degenerate society is a weird descriptor. I would never advocate for degeneracy. I'm a father. I'm mostly conservative in my values. I would never want to live in that society. I don't know which one would be worse. Maybe a libertarian degenerate society would be worse because it would just lack any form of order and would fall apart. Whether or not libertarianism is a joke or anarchy is a joke, Yeah, no. It's
I
pretty
have
well
one
thought out
quick
philosophy.
follow-up to that I want to ask Scott. If
Mhm.
there was a libertarian society that was fully libertarian, you couldn't say they weren't, but they were degenerate. And there was a libertarian leaning society that was Christian, but it infringed on some freedom,
Mhm.
some freedom. You still disagree with the freedom they're infringing, but would you still prefer the Christian society over the degenerate?
I would move there. Yeah. I mean, like so I went to Liberty University for grad school, right? So I kind of had the experience in undergrad where, you know, I voiced my opinions as like a libertarian with conservative leanings in, you know, psych and sociology classes at an art, a regular public school, and was shut down, silenced, treated like shit. You know, I had to learn to keep my mouth shut because they would, you know, say horrible things. And then I went to Liberty University as an atheist, and they did nothing but respect me. And, you know, so long as I respected their faith and, sourced things accurately with biblical texts like I was supposed to. So I've had that experience kinda in a microcosm. I would absolutely move my family and my children to a Christian society that imposed some restrictions against me than live in some degenerate fuckhole.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Cole Marshall for $5 says, everyone has a libertarian phase. If time is money, then how much tax is fair? 10% would mean 1 year. Every 10 would be free labor. Much love, guys. What do you think? I think you don't like income tax at all, do you, Scott?
No, I think taxation is a coercive form of theft, yeah. I know Jimbob disagrees, but yeah.
Well, I'm a little ignorant to the process, but correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't it the case that the government prints money and kind of spends it into existence, and then taxation is essentially like us paying a fee for using their imaginary money that they let us use, and then they pull it out of the circulation, and that's
the state gives multiple justifications for it, but like if I traded and did labor for you, right, with gold bars, the IRS would still come for my fucking money. So it's not like it really matters whether or not I'm using fiat currency or some other, exchange medium. If we start making trades with something that has value, the IRS is going to fucking come for me. You know what I mean?
I kind of see it as this. I kind of see it as it's a fee you pay for a sort of a nearly uniform currency that everyone can sort of manage to use and track. And then someone might say, well, I want to use any currency I want. And they can start inventing all sorts of different sub notes that aren't sort of authorized. And then you could hide shit that way. You could do a bunch of money laundering, of course, that way. So I think I kind of look at it as like a price you pay to use their monopoly money and to have a board to even use. And whether you think it's worth it or not, I think that's a fair assessment. But what's the alternative if there's no actual money? Is it just like seashells? And do we go back to like someone just inventing, and agreeing, okay, this week, twigs happen to be the currency representation?
I would say that, there are a lot of different forms of currency, seashells and like tribal communities and shit. It's a bit of a meme, but like that was used. I don't think we're gonna be able to do like global finance with that, right? I think you'd have to use either commodity currencies or synthetic commodity currencies. Now, technically, Bitcoin is a synthetic commodity currency because it's Dogecoin specific in that we know how much Bitcoin will eventually be released. But I do think that the algorithm by which it is released is pretty simplistic, and so I would be excited to see in the future when we have more sophisticated algorithms that are able to kind of do monetary policy the same way the Fed does in terms of releasing currency. But we could just use commodities, right, like gold or silver, or or promissory notes from institutions, contracts that say that they actually have this gold and silver. The problem is our entire economy is built up on a kind of a house of cards economy at this point, because we have fractional reserve banking, we have all that. So the switching of currency is going to be rough. But I think there are a lot of problems with our currency, and that we will eventually have to.
All right, Even Lord for $10 says Iceland was libertarian for a couple of years, and the Danish crown easily annexed them and exploited them for 1,000 years. A lord of Iceland could have argued for better rights due to power. Know anything about Iceland, Scott?
Yeah, so the Icelandic Tane system, I think it might be what they're referring to, which is where they had a very, very close to a libertarian system of law under the Icelandic Tane system, which was kind of like you would have like a local lord or like local kind of like community thing where people would do property disputes and criminal disputes, and then they would arbitrate like with the community, things that I mean, it's cool. I don't know that it's necessarily like strictly libertarian, but it is kind of a proto-libertarian area. Eventually they voted themselves into being under the crown because the benefits of the crown were better, which is kind of similarly the same thing that happened to the Republic of Kospaya from 1440 to 1826, where, you know, they were separated from the papal states and they eventually just kind of voted to be a part of the nation states because there was more benefit to them.
Okay, who gives a shit about Iceland anyway, hey? The man, the legend, for $2 says, Google Holy Trinity Church v. America.
Let me write that down.
$5 says,
I'll check it out.
Holy Trinity Church v. America. The cut for $5 says, some Dunkaroos for hosting another great debate. The ranch is next. Yes, sir. The Emu Ranch is coming. FB for $5.
Are you finally going to win a war?
Make right. Maybe one day the Emu War. We might.
You're going to win the Emu War? All right, brother.
Yeah. We'll see. Might doesn't make right. However, might does not make wrong either. Might simply just makes. Cool V1C for $5 said some grease for Jake's palms. Thank you very much, Cool. Even Lord for $5 said the Japanese emperor, holiest being their society, lost power because the enforcement arm was separated from the emperor and the shogun kept the power. Okay. Straight Shot for $10 says to both. Jews have 613 laws for their people and rulers. How many laws does the New Testament have? How can you rule a nation with 10 laws or laws that are interpreted on the fly? Jimbob, you want to start?
I wouldn't know the answer to how many quote laws, distinguishing laws from prescriptives, the term law itself, in contrast to Old Testament, the term law is already loaded in that question. And I wouldn't know the answer to how many there actually are. I look at Christianity from a sacramental approach, a praxis. And then from there, some general, I would start with general straight shot. It wouldn't be like this massive overhaul. How can you rule a nation with 10 laws? I wouldn't make the assumption that you're only ruling with 10 laws. The question of whether or not you could make a law by some interpretation of the Bible, it doesn't follow that the explicit law is located in the Bible, if that makes sense. You know, for instance, people say, well, it doesn't say you can't do X, Y, Z in the Bible, but the question is whether or not you could have a normative authority that could exegete it or determine that it's implied that, well, you wouldn't do this either because, you know, we didn't have certain technologies when the Bible was compiled.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't follow that now it means you
laws
can't
on AI from the Bible, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a good question. Straight Shot, I appreciate it because you're thinking from a practical standpoint, how do you actually do this? And I said from the beginning, it's not something you can immediately do. You actually need the numbers. And I think that's something both Scott and I would agree with is like, even if he conceded that Christianity at the national level would be better, let's just imagine he came around and he was like, yeah, I could see how it could be. You still need the people. You couldn't actually do it from a majority over the minority over the majority. You can't force people to be Christian. You have to do a little of both. You know what I mean? Like you have to actually get them converting, but you can't force conversion. So if people think Christian nationalism is an enforced conversion, it's definitely a representation of Christian nationalism I reject, just so you know.
Can I add to this? I just want to add, just as a little bit of a thing here, this is why I do have some level of respect over Christianity comparative to the other monotheistic religions, right? It is rabbinical Judaism and Islam and like, you know, the interpretations of the Hadith, especially that really do mix law as like, you know what I mean? Like, you know, I mean, what is Islam but submission to Allah, right? Like, and the rabbinical Judaism, the cope after, you know, Christianity comes around of like, we'll just keep writing more and more laws and rules, right? And it is Christianity that I think, you know, obviously different denominations will have different interpretations, but it is something about the simplicity of it, right? Of God's 10 commandments, and then, you know, other interpretations from like letters and et cetera that do allow for that, you know, that the church to have their authority and for some legal framework, usually a monarchy, right, to deal with the temporal conditions of the day-to-day governance of a society. I do think that is clearly superior to Islam, which, or to Judaism in that regard.
Cool. Flowing Glass for $10 says, I didn't know Seth Rogen did debates. Abject Fool for 50 said, why not look to the first 1,000 years of Christianity instead of libertarianism? Christian nationalism is more coherent. I think Jimbob would agree with that. Oliver Catwell became a new member. Welcome. John Dinan said, Gail O'Connor has finally arrived. Good to see him in the chat. Jordan Lofgren said, you just said libertarianism makes invalid systems that go against NAP and makes no ethical claims. Is it unethical under your view to violate the NAP, non-aggression principle, Scott?
Obviously, I would have other ethical things on top of it, right? I'm primarily an objectivist in my moral framework. But even still, there is debate amongst libertarianism about whether or not argumentation ethics bridges the is-ought kind of gap, right? Because it's kind of one of those things where, well, if it is impossible to argue for an ethical system that also violates the NAP because it becomes a performative contradiction, then does it not make the ought claim that one ought not violate the NAP? And there are some people, Liquid Zulu, if you want to check him out, he has really good arguments where he believes that is true. Where I kind of sit more on the side of, well, when you're arguing to violate the NAP, you are simply saying might makes right, and then therefore I'm justified in using any and all violence against you. You're saying rights don't exist. I don't care. Power is what matters. And so in that moment, you have no argument about me using power against you. So check out Liquid Zulu if you want more of someone on that side of the fence. He hasn't convinced me fully there.
Cool. Guys, we've got 7 more super chats until we reach that 50 goal. So let's hit that goal for this fine entertainment put on for you all this evening. Abject Fool for $20 said everyone should go to each of these 3 streams and leave a like on it. I completely agree with that.
Agree, yeah, hell yeah.
Should. Yeah. And
especially since Jimbob has so many more people and viewers than me.
All the links for the streams are down below as well, guys. Cole Marshall for $5 says, damn, Jimbob, I was about to ask, without a state, how do you prove ownership? And you asked him the question. Great job. Jordan Lofgren said, Scott might makes reality except in property. He's quoting Scott there, apparently.
No, it's not a quote from me. The first part is.
Walter Mullen said for $20, can both answer if cultural values of the seaman warriors of Papua New Guinea are compatible within libertarian or Christian nations? So,
yeah, very easily. They're not compatible because they violate the bodily autonomy of boys. They rape them, and then sometimes they kill them if they won't drink the semen from adults. It is one of the most aggressive and evil societies in the world. And that's just from a libertarian perspective, much less all of the other disgusting views that I would shape on that level of
Wait, that's San Francisco or where is it?
Right.
All right.
He didn't even ask the Christian because we all know. We all know that the Christian would be like, no.
Yeah. Morehead64 for $20 says, Scott's position, my property is mine because I said so first and people should respect my claim. But we don't need to have a government body to enforce my claim. People should just respect it and I don't have to enforce my claim. Is that an accurate steel man of your position there, Scott?
No, that's obviously a straw man because I said from the very beginning that, might doesn't make right, but it does make reality. And, you have to be willing to defend your property. And if you're going to live in an ordered society, you're going to have to come up with some means of defending and imposing those rules and restrictions, or you're just going to get taken over by warlords and people that, look at Japan, right? I think Japan is a great example of a high trust society that, have skirted by for so long. And with, recent immigration and things of that nature, you're seeing, people come in and they don't share those values that the Japanese have, and they're throwing trash into the koi rivers, and they're breaking into vending machines, and they're vandalizing shrines. Like, you have to have an enforcement mechanism, because there will be people that grow up or change opinions or whatever that don't share your values.
Yep, fair enough. All right. One old guy's opinion had a series of comments here for Scott. So Fabian argues like a Democrat via interruptions, over talking, and gaslighting. He said Fabian is like a Democrat in the way in that when I describe a Democrat, I take away reason and accountability. Kind of like maybe a woman. He's describing a woman.
That's a quote from a film where the lady asks her, "How do you write women so well?" And he says, "I think about a man and I take away reason and accountability." It's a funny line.
One old guy's opinion also said, it sounds like Fabian just skimmed over a book on the topic and is trying to debate what he just skimmed over. Appreciate all the patronage of one old man's opinion. The cut for $5 said, Scott, when it takes 1 hour to answer 4 questions with contradictions, isn't it obvious proof that your worldview causes chaos and not good for society?
Yeah, I don't think I do think that being kind of, I'm trying to remember that quote of like the brevity is like the soul of wit. Like, I do think there is something to the concept of me being better at being succinct. And that's a fair critique, but it says nothing to do with, whether or not one is better for society or anything. It's just an insult that they paid $5 for.
Okay. Gail O'Connor said, have a blessed Good Friday. I'm still catching up. Submit to Rome, or Gail O'Connor will send Sam Shamoon with his orbs at you. I wouldn't want that now. Wouldn't want another Sam Shamoon spurg out, hey? The cut for $5 says, sorry, last one. If you need at least 2 people for libertarianism, what if you have someone with schizophrenia?
What if? I mean, it's just a crazy person.
I'm not really sure.
You know what I mean? I hope they find a second person or a third in this example so somebody can help them out, right? Because we wouldn't want them offing themselves, as Jimbob was talking about, right? I don't want them killing themselves. So,
yeah. Jordan for $10 says, Scott, you at no point argued for libertarianism. You preached about it, then deflected all interrogations, nor provided any real evidence of its consistency or practicality. It's a statement rather than a question. Sean Hardesty for $10 says, in order for libertarianism to be a valuable societal structure, it has to borrow from a moral framework of Christianity to account for the evilness of humans. Naj for $5 says, don't go chasing waterfalls. Fantastic advice. Straight Shot for $5 says, Jimbob, do you support the US Constitution? Do you know America has been a republic since its inception?
Yeah, I'm pretty critical of the Constitution. It's basically like an artifact of Enlightenment thinking. And even though some of it's workable, like logistically, I wouldn't upend it. I wouldn't take some accelerationist approach and destroy everything ground up. It's just that it's my critique of the Constitution is it sits on unjustified positions, metaphysics, ethics. It has this self-evidential approach to it, which I think ultimately we're seeing the results of. Why? Because if you don't actually get specific with who God is, you were created with this and that. Who's your creator? Just keep it ambiguous. Okay. That doesn't work. If you go away from that, then people make all sorts of things their God. They make the government their God, Democrats. They make rocks and space their God. They make all sorts of shit their God. And you can't really argue against it from a constitutional approach because it's self-evident that you have the right to do anything. And then, you see where we're at. I think it's all of classical liberalism, libertarianism, anarchism, all of these views are sitting on sand or at least wax-filled pillars. So Constitution I include in that.
Right. All right, guys, 5 more.
Can I suggest a reading real quick? The
Yep.
Constitution of No Authority, number 6 by Lysander Spooner. The Constitution's just a piece of fucking paper.
5 more super chats until we hit that 50 goal, guys. We want to be hitting that before we finish this stream up, that's for sure. Ben Watts for $10 says, libertarianism failed when Carthage was conquered by the Romans. One old guy's opinions says, Fabianism is morally intellectually and cannot convey his message coherently because of his moral and intellectual shortcomings. Libertarianism is not anarchy, and Fabian Scott is pushing for anarchy with the examples he gave. What would you say about that, Scott?
I would say if you're going to insult someone for being incoherent, you should probably like check your sentence structure a little bit. But beyond all of that, libertarianism in the American vein is absolutely 100% anarchism. To deny that is to simply not understand the history of it. It was created by Murray Rothbard. He coined the term anarcho-capitalism as what libertarianism is, and his inspiration were the American anarcho-individualists such as Josiah Warren, Benjamin Tucker, Lysander Spooner, Voltairine de Cleyre. So, you know, I don't know, maybe he's a European and he's thinking about like Libertarian Socialism by de Jacques, which is really just a cope because the term had fallen out of use, and that's why Rothbard used it. So yeah, I would invite him to read some Murray Rothbard to learn about the foundations of libertarianism, and it's a good read.
Nick gifted 10 Rattlesnake TV memberships. Thank you very much, Nick. That is greatly
Hell yeah.
appreciated. Mored64 said, for $10, the problem with Scott's idea is that it only works as long as everyone agrees to abide by the terms of the society. It collapses as soon as someone doesn't and has the force to take what they want. Anything on that, Scott?
Yeah, I would just say again, in the debate I mentioned Jack Donovan's violence is golden, that it's the final answer to the question, or else what? This is just a straw man of my position. I maybe go back and watch the rest of the debate. I feel like you missed some of it.
Guy Incognito says, there is a problematic community member in my libertarian community. He humps goats while yelling, non-aggression principle, you can't touch me. Really wish we could do something about it.
Yeah, fuck him up.
I'm sorry to hear about
Beat
that,
his ass.
Guy Incognito. One Old Guy's Opinions for $10 says, my question for Q&A is, what is the difference between libertarianism and anarchy? According to Fabian Scott's examples seem to be closer to anarchy. You kind of already argued that, but if you want to give a short response about the difference.
Yeah, the problem with the term libertarianism is that it's often treated like as an adjective, right? So people will be like, "Oh, I'm kind of libertarian," or libertarianism, and so there's this big tent philosophy that a lot of leftists and you remember Jimbob said, we can't say the F slur on YouTube and things like that, but we often call them Prague F slur because they rhyme. And a lot of small L libertarians and things. And then there's the Libertarian Party, and so people have this big tent philosophy with the Libertarian Party. But no, libertarianism is anarchy, and anyone that tries to say otherwise is probably a neophyte or not well read on the subject, or is trying to be a subversive that is trying to enter libertarian spaces and dilute it.
Just Gerald for $10. Good to see you in the chat. Just Gerald, a great man, said, I missed the whole debate because I'm employed, but Jimbob was on fire tonight. Probably. Yes.
Congrats, Jimbob. You were on fire tonight.
Probably.
Most likely. $20 from Jag48 says, thanks, Scott. W. Jimbob. Scott, stop being scared of the incomprehensible. No human has a grasp on the universe or Big Bang. Follow what has worked best for millennia and still works best now. What would you say about that, Scott?
I would say that one of the reasons that I have a certain respect for Christianity is because, I really hate how most atheists, especially because so many of them are on the left, completely dismiss, the Bible, completely dismiss Christian ethics, completely dismiss all these things. And it is, we're talking about a book that is 8,000 years of shared human wisdom. And so anybody that just immediately dismisses all of that and the functional aspect that it has in society and culture is ignorant and full of hubris. Obviously, I do reject it in some degree, but not for not trying, but yeah, so, but that doesn't mean that we can't try new things or that we shouldn't move forward in some progress. But progress for progress's sake is why we have nothing but degeneracy in a rotten society today.
Wait, Scott, did you say without trying? Did you say that you, like, from your view, you tried Christianity personally, like a thing to try? Is that what you meant by that?
I went to Orthodox Church as an atheist for about a year. I went to Liberty University. I really genuinely tried to become a Christian, but ultimately I could not accept it.
John Dinan for $5 says, "Hey Scott, what's your thoughts on neo-reactionary thought like Curtis Yarvin's patchwork system? Seems like you're advocating something similar."
Curtis Yarvin or Mencius Mollbug has had some really good writings. I think, I especially love the term the cathedral to describe, the state, not just as the government body, but, Hollywood and the media and, academic institutions that are funded by the government and, non-governmental organizations, which are only non-governmental in name only. But obviously as a libertarian, I'm not a post-anarchist or post-libertarian. So I do have disagreements, but I do think he has some good thoughts and ideas.
Guys, we also officially smashed through the Super Chat goals, so appreciate that tonight. One old guy's opinions is back. Said, wouldn't natural law mean to go fight it out and the fittest survive and wins? Scott, you just might be on the short end of that law unless you get to training for a fight.
I appreciate
one old guy's opinions.
I would fight his opinions. I don't want to physically fight too much. I was in the army for a while, and that's where I discovered that I have a connective tissue disorder. So, I might be 6'5", but that's about the only thing that is intimidating about me in a fight. Nevertheless, natural law just means objective. That's really all it means, right? So Christians would use the term natural law to describe the fact that it comes from God and it's objective, or Locke would use it in a different way, but yeah.
Yeah. Airborne Animal for $10 says, the problem with libertarians is the same problem with socialists. They think they are so right, but are so wrong. And they are so arrogant and smarmy that they cannot accept logical argumentation.
True.
Atheist legend.
I'm full of nothing but narcissism and ego. Give me money and likes.
Atheist Legend 3000 says, Scott, why are you saying libertarianism has no ethics when the non-aggressional principle is an ethical ought?
Yeah, that was what I said before about argumentation ethics and whether or not does it go the is-ought gap. Like people like Liquid Zulu would be more on the it does bridge that gap. I'm more of in the position that it just proves that individuals that attempt to justify ethical systems that violate the NAP are in contradiction. So I feel like I kind of already answered that question.
John Donner for $10 says, question for Jimbob. How would an Orthodox Christian nationalist society deal with the issue of church disagreeing with policy? For example, church leadership says your immigration policy is evil.
Well, if Christian nationalism was in effect and it was Orthodox, the question kind of assumes that there could be another Christian nationalist position that's not Orthodox. I just wouldn't grant that. Like I wouldn't appeal to Protestantism and say it's Christian nationalism, if that makes sense. So if Christian nationalism was in place and a symphonia between church and state was in place, I don't think there would be disagreement in policy other than maybe like very temporary social reactions to things. Karonka was, I don't know if I can say COVID on YouTube, was a good example where different districts reacted differently, but it had nothing to do with the overall doctrine. It wasn't a doctrinal thing. It wasn't, it didn't suspend the sacraments and their meaning and application and so forth. So yeah, I think the question would be if another proclaimed Christian church took a nationalist power position, the question would be, how would Orthodoxy disagree with their policies? Like, for instance, like same-sex marriage and abortion and these things, which they do increasingly take these positions. So
cool. Guy Incognito says, Jake wants the grift and I will oblige. Thanks to Jimbob and Scott for the debate. Thank you, Guy Incognito. Justin Martins for $10 says nothing, just showing support for the channel. Thank you, Justin. Like a good woman. If there are any women watching that want to send me money and not say anything in the text, that would be fantastic as well. One old guy's opinions for $5 says sentence structure is limited by YouTube. Very nice try on comeback. He's on fire tonight. One old guy's opinions. Jonathan Diner for $10 says, question for Scott. Maybe it was covered earlier and missed course. I was listening to X Speed. How would enforcement of contracts be done in libertarian monarchy? Like, who will be doing said enforcement?
Well, if you had a libertarian monarchy, and it would again, it would depend upon what the king decided, and whether or not people agreed to, come to that society would probably be dependent upon how that society was faring, or whether or not they believed in said king. There's not really there's not really it's one of those things where it's like people are like, oh, well, you propose something different, then answer all questions at all times for all of the future in all cases. It's like, I don't fucking know. You know what I mean? Like, it would be, if a bunch of people came together, agreed to follow a king, how that king ran his kingdom would probably determine whether or not more people came to that kingdom or not, and whether or not it was effective.
I have a follow-up question. In a libertarian society that's purely contract-based, is it a contradiction to if everyone used contracts to agree in levels of violation of autonomy? Like, that was the agreement.
What do you mean?
Like a type of like the movie, like The Purge or something. It's not to the death, but like something less gruesome, like a libertarian society exists. They come together and they agree through contract, right? Through argumentation.
Oh, okay. I
They
think I get what you're saying.
agree with a future, a year, let's say, that includes active, out of nowhere, spontaneous aggression, acts of aggression. But they agree to it, right?
So you can agree to, let's say, mutual combat or something, right? Like, I can agree to fight you or do a boxing match, right? But contracts cannot compel future behavior, because that would violate bodily autonomy. So, for example, let's say my kid's having a birthday party and I really love your music. So I say, I have a contract with you that says, you will sing at my kid's birthday party for $100. I can't go and that's all the contract says. Well, if you don't show up, I can't come and punish you for violating that contract.
What if it? But what if it was agreed?
Let's say you have a sore throat.
Yeah, but Scott, I'm getting to the question of what if you agreed? What if you agreed ahead of time, without any contract of showing up to the party? A bunch of libertarians in a society get bored one day and they make an agreement with contracts that at any given point after that contract, for no reason at all, there was no aggression first.
That's not a contract.
Why not?
So, because a contract is an agreement to title transfer of property. A contract isn't, I agree to engage in behavior. Now, that can be a condition for the transfer of property. So, for example, I have a contract with you that says I'll pay you $100 for you to sing at my kid's birthday party. But I could also put in a stipulation that says, if you fail to do this, then you owe me $50. So, in a contract, you can have an agreement to the transfer agreement to transfer the title of property, but you cannot compel behavior in the future, because doing so would violate your bodily autonomy. What if you woke up on the day of my kid's birthday party and you were having a panic attack, or your voice was like, your throat was like you got the flu, or you got the COVID, you got the coof, right? Whatever it is, and you can't sing that day. Like, I can't come in, kidnap you, and force you to sing. But if there is an agreement in the contract that says, if you don't show up, then you owe me $50, that property can then become my property.
Wait a second. Are you saying a contract must include some potential or actual exchange of material or labor?
If you don't have a title of transfer of property, then it's just the agreement of some sort, but it's not a legally binding contract under libertarian philosophy.
Huh. Okay.
Walter Mellon for $5 says, "Fight me, Jimbob." Jimbob, do you accept?
It depends where you are and how long I can train.
Hold on. His name is Watermelon, which means he might be a
Walter
but he might be a pro-Palestine supporter. And if that's the case, I think anybody can take him in a fight.
By his name, he probably lives in Chicago.
We have got Just Gerald coming in hot for Jimbob. I think I'm looking at Jimbob's stream right now. He's got 40 out of 50 for his super chat goal. 10 more. 10 more and Jimbob hits his goal, guys. So Just Gerald came in and said, we really need to hit this goal. Let's hit this goal.
Thanks,
Just Gerald said, if we don't reach this goal, Jimbob's going to have to sell one of his guitars for food.
Right.
Do you really want to see an empty space where a guitar once
was, like an
Nobody
outline, the white chalk
wants
outline?
that.
Yeah.
Darth Maul also coming in with the Bob chats. Guys, make sure we get Jimbob over the 50 super chat goal. If we don't, then it'll be a shame because Jimbob's done such a great job with entertainment tonight. One Old Guy's Opinions says, you are a good sport, Fabian Scott. Thanks for the entertainment. I would agree.
I agree.
would agree.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. I saw you on Tim Pool's Culture War, and I was really interested by some of the arguments you were making, which is why I reached out to you to do this debate. So I'm glad.
Yeah, it was fun, and this was fun as well.
Yeah. And Abby Zhong sends $50 and says, I'm saying nothing.
Thank you, Abby. I appreciate you.
Abby, that is absolutely beautiful. There's I think it's a Spanish saying where it says there's beauty in silence when it comes to women. So I would completely agree with that. Anyways, fellas, I really appreciate you guys both coming on. I thought it was a really super interesting debate. Some great perspectives. And I'd love to, obviously, Jimbob, you'll probably be back on like next week or something. But Fabian, I'd love to have you, Scott, I'd love to have you back on at some point as well. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, my DMs are open.
Yep. Awesome.
But if you email me, it might take a couple days.
Yeah. Okay, cool. All right. Well, I'm going to get rid of you guys now and enjoy your evenings.
Thank you so much.
Have a good Friday.
Take care. All righty. Well.
All right. Let's get some music. Scott, I begged your people to send you more. I appreciate it. We're libertarians here, all right? We don't give a lot of money. How's the Jimbob bingo card doing, Scott? I mean, it's all the same shit that I knew that he would. I was like, yeah, I see where you're going. I see where you're going with this. Can we just skip to the argument that, well, if there's just two people, then there is no ethics. And it's like, yeah, I know. It was fun. It was exactly what I expected it was, right? Which is completely getting away from what Christian nationalism is, not defining Christian nationalism as anything coherent, trying to go into, logical arguments, and then just aggressively misunderstanding what libertarianism is, and then just memeing, making jokes, and interrupting and going on long speeches is exactly what I expected it would be. You know what I mean? But it was fun nevertheless. He was contradicting his own Christian ethic, was incredibly frustrating. It doesn't matter if you just make pithy remarks and jokes and interrupt people and be like, I got you and I got you. I got you to admit the thing that you've said this entire time. And then he just kept saying I had zero arguments in my opening statement. And dude, I feel like I really got under his skin by not debating, by my opening statement being a really good story about Christian monarchy and the fall of Christian monarchy and the embracing of socialism in the state and compromising with evil, and why a libertarian framework under Christianity. I appreciate it. Thank you. I think I really, he kept being like, oh, it's a good story. Yeah, whatever. I think I really got under his skin by not doing what he expected, which was just whatever he thought libertarianism was, by putting it in the framework of Christianity and what Christians ought do and how Christians can, have a system that actually aligns and doesn't have all those issues. He was like, ooh, this is rough. So he immediately just tried to run away from that the entire debate, which, he did. At a certain point, I don't want to be that annoying guy that just keeps going, no, you stick to it. At a certain point, I just let him because I knew in my closing statement I would be able to say that. My opening statement begins with the story of the execution of Nicholas II and compares Christian monarchy under an anarcho-capitalist voluntary system versus Christian nationalism. And then his definition of Christian nationalism is we just vote for Christians, which is such a bullshit fucking thing. It's so silly. It's oh, okay. Well, what about libertarian Christians? Well, libertarians can't be Christian. Why? Because they won't stop people from jacking off on the street. It's all right, bro. It was fun though. He's got a long way to go in wearing that Wilson aesthetic. You're talking about him or me? I do love that he got mad when I called him a socialist. I love calling conservatives socialists. Jumped on when I could. What's the word? Any converts? Well, to their group, you know, a couple of undecideds of the 9% went over to Jimbob. Like, he started with 82% and went to 85%, and I stayed exactly the same. Which, like, trying to do it like it's an Oxford style debate where you're voting in the beginning and voting in the end during a live stream is really funny to me. It's because that doesn't work. Like, you know, that's obviously not how that works. You have to have the same people in the same room, and even then you could game the system. But I knew, like, whatever poll or whatever voting thing wasn't going to make any sense on a popular. Exactly. I mean, Jimbob was sitting at like almost 700 viewers at the end, and also Jake Rattlesnake is an Orthodox channel, so his viewers are there. So it's just like, come on, man. Penny saved is penny earned. Well done, Fabian. I appreciate it. Thank you. I do appreciate all the support, guys. It's like, there was totally like 9% of people, you know, in the explicitly Orthodox Ortho Bro debate thing that almost always has Christian Orthodox people. They were totally on the fence. Yeah, of course some of them lied. What's really funny though, I think, is my percentage didn't change at all. And there's no way there weren't some people that voted for me just to vote for Jimbob later. Does your audience agree with you? That's the poll. Yeah, no, I mean, like, you can look at like Intelligence Squared debates, and they do them pretty well because, you know, they're locked in a room. It's the same people voting too. It was exactly as I expected, and it was fun. How will you ever achieve libertarianism without popularity? Well, you're here and you hate libertarianism. So maybe I can feed off of my haters as well, Ricardo Martinez. Maybe the anti-libertarian crowd can come here and give me popularity without agreeing with me, and then I will use that to get converts elsewhere. Yeah, I know. I've seen Ricardo being like, oh, blah, blah, blah. It's fine, whatever. Like, that's what a chat on YouTube is for, man. You know, like, it's for people to disagree and spurg out and rage or come up with ideas, like, to have fun, man. 95% of Scott's viewers are haters. It's slow and Fabian conversion. Yeah, true. Yeah, the Crucible and their hangers on are entertainers. Nothing is real. It's worse than Hippy Dippy because they don't admit how shallow, vapid, and scripted it is. I kind of agree, Mark. Libertarian is the other half of human organization. You either have subjective law force in or objective law enforce or agreed upon systems in the legal medium. I'm not sure I actually understand what your argument is there. I get being performative, and I'm not even a libertarian, but sometimes as a viewer, I just want a good faith back and forth over time. Yeah, I mean, you kind of have to play, you have to kind of just play to the audience in some degree, right? You have to do, like, at the end of the day, my goal is to spread libertarianism and to gain money and fame in some regard, right? So that I can continue to spread libertarianism, and so I can do this as a job and you know, feed my family and, you know, and feed myself and etc. But yeah, so, but at the same time, you also have to realize that for a lot of people, this is reality TV for guys that are into politics. That's what this is, right? It's like I put on a show, and when I do debates, I am the male version of the Real Housewives of Atlanta. And so if I eschew that totally, then I'm not going to achieve any level of success. I like to agree with Mark, but I really, really dislike Hippy Dippy. Well, I'm the third Hippy Dippy Rumble champion, and I never got my shot on for the title. But I am the third person to win the championship on Hippy Dippy. But I think the reason Mark was saying that is because Dylan Burns, you know, he knew it was a wrestling show, and he told people that. What I mean is the NAP being objective applied to all, but the web of contracts is how you form that community with agreed upon rules. Yeah, I agree. The problem is that like Jimbob is like, the entire thing is just a category error, and he admits it multiple times, and yet some people seem to think that that's based of him to admit that it's a category error. It's like, yeah, libertarianism doesn't make all these moral law claims. That doesn't make you right by default. He's like, but I have ethics. It's like, yeah, but your ethics are invalid because you justify the violation of the non-aggression principle. What are you talking about? Have I ever read The Rebel by Camus? I've gotten about halfway through it, and it's fairly good. No, I haven't. I probably should at some point. Jake sat there and let Jimbob spaz until it's annoying, even for their people. Then he let you finish. It's intentionally set up for to force a loss on guests, which is kind of shitty. That's how most of these programs are. That's why Casimir was like, dude, this is a trap. Scott won the debate, but Casimir won Kinsella's heart. Fuck you, Casimir. Kinsella followed me back, too. All right? When he saw the post, he liked the post and then followed me back. Okay? He had followed my old account. The one that got banned off of X. I'll begrudgingly admit the kayfabe in Hippy Dippy was more open and it made that element more fun. Yeah. Hey man, epic win over Jimbob. I appreciated Night Shift. Stefan, I'm assuming that's supposed to be Kinsella. I don't know what Nikayla is. Somehow follows me. Dude, you're pretty big on Twitter in the libertarian space. What do you mean? Sorry, I was just DMing Jake and Jimbob. They were like, enjoyed it, and I was like, yeah, it was like fun debate, and thank you. Next time, let me tear into a lefty so I don't have to fight the audience. It's like, if you liked it, let me go after some lefties so everybody can get behind me and be like, fuck yeah. Scott, do you like Nietzsche? I mean, I don't think he's right on a lot of things, but I really enjoyed Will to Power, as well as Thus Spake Zarathustra. I genuinely do really, really appreciate the Three Metamorphoses, which is a section of Thus Spake Zarathustra, on like the concept of people being the load-bearing camel, and then eventually having to turn into the monster that slays the dragon of Thou Shalt. And then the concept of being a child. I think that does, a child that has to discover their own ways. I think there's some flaws with it, but it's very good reading, and it's very good. It's very good in that regard. I do think slave morality and master morality are pretty fucking close. And to be fair, as much as objectivists won't admit it, you don't get Nietzsche without Stirner, and you don't get Ayn Rand without Nietzsche, as far as I'm concerned. I do think it's probably possible that Ayn Rand would have existed without Nietzsche, but I also think it's very possible that she never would have existed. And so I do think that that there is value in that as well. Nietzsche seems like proto-libertarian, like the next step from Aristotle on the way to anarcho-capitalism. No, Nietzsche's more the next step of Stirner, right? Like of ethical egoism. And so there's going to be some similarities there, but I don't think he's like a proto-libertarian. I just think he has some philosophy that is kind of, correct and probably gets closer to libertarianism than does Stirner. But yeah, I don't know that, I wouldn't say that he's a proto-libertarian. You don't get Nietzsche without Stirner is literally a point that Camus makes in The Rebel. All right, fair enough. What about Thomas Sowell? I love Thomas Sowell. I think Basic Economics is an insanely good book. It's like so good at explaining all of the Chicago school thoughts and theories on economics in one concise book. I also think Black Rednecks and White Liberals is like, Black Rednecks and White Liberals is fucking amazing and really interesting read and understanding about culture from like his perspective. I obviously haven't read everything by Sowell, but I like him. Peak moment on X last month was when Thomas Sowell quotes account started shilling for tariffs. That's funny. It's always difficult to watch two individuals that I care very much weirdos. I'm sorry that I put you in a difficult position, Nico. Yeah, Black Rednecks, White Liberals is good. It really genuinely explains the concept of like where black culture comes from, because they adopted redneck, impoverished, Irish kind of, culture. The honor culture, the violence in it, much of the slang and the verbiage of Ebonics is not fucking black words. They're old school redneck words. Obviously, in modern times, they've developed their own lingo and things of that nature. We was Irish and shit. Can certainly see how one can be drawn to libertarian positions, starting with Stirner. Well, I think Stirner is like, he starts to show the cracks in the foundation of communism, Marxism, anarcho-communism, etc. So like if you were an ANCOM or you were a commie or a tanky and you started reading Stirner, you could begin to understand how some of the axioms and principles of socialism are false. And if you already kind of have that could be a trip towards libertarianism away from those. It's not how my journey went, but I could see that happening. With communities in the libertarian society would be subjected to market forces. I think a community most successful is one who has a good balance of including most lifestyles, while also removing the high time preference practices of those same people's lifestyles, i.e. you can use drugs, but don't go overboard. It's an interesting thought. I don't think so. I think the societies that will outcompete will be societies that are more traditionally conservative. But I'd welcome that, I welcome that competition under libertarianism, but like I wouldn't move my family and my children to a society that is like permissive of drugs and things of that nature. Libertarians brought Trump to their convention and had prominent libertarians endorse Trump as well. LOL. Yeah, that was a big LOL. And by libertarians, you mean the LP that was obsessed with, might even be money laundering. Who knows? There's also, if I want your stuff would be useless to me if I were dead. So I should find a peaceful, voluntary means to acquire your stuff. Yeah, it's like, there's a certain critical mass of people that follow things for society to function, right? You will never get a pure libertarian society. How could you? Because some people are going to be criminals. Some people are going to violate the NAP. Some people are going to, say, or else what, right? But if you have a certain critical mass of people that follow an idea and follow these principles, then the pieces kind of fall into place. Because if most people believe in this and most people are espousing these beliefs and the systems and the institutions are libertarian, then everyone else just goes along to get along. It was just like when Jimbob asked me if you had a libertarian degenerate society and like a Christian society that was mostly libertarian but violated some rights, like which would you prefer to live in? I was like, yeah, I'd voluntarily move to the one that is not degenerate and full of drugs and chaos and all the bad things, because it's in my rational self-interest to do so. I'd have to meet Scott in the marketplace. I would prefer the alcohol-only toga society with Roman arches. Roman arches fucking everywhere and togas with saunas. So long as the saunas don't get too gay, it sounds pretty dope. You could just genetically refine everyone to be liberty-loving? I don't know that that would work. I became ANCAP once I could mentally actualize how enforcement minus state could function and do so well. I think that's the key pillar for many. That was what it was for me, Silk Fox. It wasn't, I wasn't convinced by Chaos Theory by Robert Murphy, but that was the book that changed me from like a minarchist on the fence to like, oh, there is a system of government, prison, and law enforcement that doesn't need a state. This isn't my preferred one, but this one is valid and I could see it working. And once I was like, could conceptualize where that could be done without the state, I was convinced that the state was unnecessary. That would mean war stops, though. I mean, I wouldn't mind an end to war. Like, you know what I mean? Like, oh no, my non-existent Lockheed Martin stocks will go down. Heaven forbid. Maybe once every country is equally armed with deterrence, you can maybe then get your critical mass. Even then, I doubt it. I mean, like, I guess I don't understand your critique here, right? Like, if a libertarian society exists, I don't know that it will be able to beat world superpowers. What I do know for a fact is that the price mechanism in the market is incentivized towards efficiency in a way that centrally planning isn't. And so, 100 people aren't going to be able to take on the United States government. But I do know that whatever amount of money the 100 people spend towards, if we run the iteration over and over again, the incentive structures of the market are better at providing for defense and deterrence than would be central planners. And so if we run the experiment over and over and over again, eventually we would get to a situation where, like, if half the world was ANCAP and the other half isn't, then there will be a lot of ANCAP societies that are far better at defending themselves with far better weaponry for the price. Rich men buy stocks. That's their problem. Casino for the rich. Betting on who will succeed or won't, in my opinion. I don't think there's anything wrong with buying stocks. I just think that our current economic system, which is in part socialist, is where we have problems with the stock market. Like, too big to fail is a huge fucking problem. And, genuine fraud not being investigated because the government has all of their crony shit with, equity firms. And another thing that I think is extremely anti-libertarian in our current market is that equity firms can forcibly buy company stock and then take over those companies against their will, right? The entire board of directors and the CEO don't want to be bought out, but because they're like publicly traded, they can then be bought out by a company that has a majority shareholder. And then because they can go in and put in a bunch of like high time preference things to boost their stock and in the short term, and then sell off the stock after they've destroyed and gutted the company. I think that is an incredibly bad thing. So like for those reasons, I have problems with the stock market. But I don't think the concept of investing in the stock market is inherently bad or anything, right? I do think that it is like you need investment in order to, like you need like what is it required to produce a good or service? You need land, labor, and capital. Sometimes you can do it without labor. Sometimes you can do it without land, right? But you need a minimum of 2 out of the 3. And if you go through the whole supply chain and, you know, from you know, the material resources all the way to the finished product, then you're invariably going to get land, labor, and capital in different forms in different steps. And so trading or buying stocks is a means by which to gain or, you know, to gain access to capital. And capital investment is incredibly necessary for the, you know, for an advanced economic system, because it utilizes and takes advantage of the universal time preference, right? If I want to make a pencil or I want to make, you know, paper, I have to adequately predict how much paper people are going to need in the future. And so there's going to need to be some capital investment by someone to make the paper now, despite the fact that it's going to take a while before we get to the time where we can sell the paper. Somebody's got to put up front the money so that we can make that paper, so that we have something to sell in the future, as opposed to like making it all by hand every step of the way. You're not going to make much paper. And so being able to raise funds for your business, you know, by people that have money that they don't know what to do with, right? And then give them a return on investment so that they can make money by investing in you, so that you can raise capital for like a really good idea or a good business or to grow your business is a good thing that we want to encourage. And so maybe in an anarcho-capitalist system, stocks as they are now don't function the same way, but you certainly want to be able to raise capital and allow people to raise capital with loans, you know, in different ways for people to make money by accurately predicting, ooh, this is a good business idea. I'm going to invest in this business idea because I can tell based upon my knowledge that this is going to be really good in the future, even though, and I can tell that people are undervaluing this business idea because I have special knowledge. And that's what makes a capitalist system function so much better than a socialist system, where central planners are very high time preference and where nobody can be an expert on the whole economy. And even when you attempt to grab more and more experts, you just spend money. GoFundMe exists. Well, GoFundMe is just another means of raising capital. Just like Patreon, just like Kickstarter. Like it's the same, the stocks are fundamentally the same kind of concept. Maybe not Kickstarter because you're just doing it because of the love of the game most of the time. But yeah. When does altruism become good then, or does it not? I could go into super detail, but altruism is evil. I'll just leave it at that. We can have that talk another day. My idea of conservatism, I base it on time preferences. The super exclusionary, like an entire race, fundamentally anti-meritocratic, but general conservative is to still include but exclude their high time preference practice. But what I said earlier, it's more of an abstract ideal. The ideology that the community may give some bias to inclusion or exclusion. I think I might be too dumb for that. Yo, Casimir became a member. Boys, you do not realize how big of a deal this is. Casimir does not fucking donate money. Casimir does not fucking support channels with super chats and things, okay? Casimir is like, I'm not going to say that Casimir is a cheap Jew. That would be evil and fucked up, okay? I am not attributing it to you being a Jew whatsoever, but you are someone that doesn't necessarily buy the war bonds. But Casimir supporting the channel is huge. I love you, Casimir. Thank you so much. Holy shit. Hell yeah. Casimir, you're my man. Casimir helped me in debate prep for this, and I greatly appreciate it. I took a little bit of a different twist on it, and he was kind of already in vein with what I was thinking, but he really helped punch up some of my like opening statement and where I was going with it. Not necessarily the story element and other things, but he did help me with a lot of ideas and arguments and give me some good ideas. So I much appreciate it, Casimir. I appreciate everybody that donated tonight. I'll probably come back Sunday. Make sure you guys like, share, and subscribe. Follow me on X or Twitter if you want to give me, if you want to see my shower thoughts or my toxic ideas. If you want to be a part of the community and you want to know when the go lives go out, join the Discord. You'll always get a notification before I start stream on Discord and right when I'm starting stream, as opposed to YouTube. Notification bell doesn't always work. Consider becoming a member for only $3.99. You get access to badges and emotes. Support the channel. I always answer all super chats. I really appreciate you guys, and I'll see you guys. Oh shit! I'll respond to that in a second. But I'll probably be back Sunday. We'll probably do some gaming or something. Have a little Sunday fun day. If you want to ask more questions and things like that, let me know. To the dumbbells fund, if they are less than 20 pounds each, you're doing it wrong. Because of my disease, my connective tissue disorder, I tend to stray away from free weights because I do have very weak joints. And free weights can be a problem for that. Cable machines are a lot better for me. Well, you don't do yoga, dude. Listen, if I did yoga, I don't know. You probably should do yoga, but yoga is difficult for me because it's like I can't motivate myself to do yoga at all. Cause I'm just sitting there and it's too relaxing and it's too easy for me to give up, right? But if I physically leave where I'm at and go to a gym, then all right, I'm already here. Let me get the thing done. Come do it on the roof at my job. I mean, I guess if I physically left the apartment and went to your job to go do rooftop yoga, I would probably get it done, but that's a lot. I'd rather just walk to the gym in the apartment complex. But I appreciate the funds. 1337 is a really specific number that leads me to believe that there's a joke there that I'm not getting. A slang term or a form of leet speak I had forgotten about that. I had forgotten about leet. Holy shit. I had completely memory hold that. Yo. Oh shit. I appreciate you even more. I had memory hold that, and that just came back from the depths of my knowledge as a teenager. Holy shit. I love you, Casimir. I love all you guys. Come join the Discord. I'll probably stream Sunday, take tomorrow off, get some other things done, and then Sunday we'll do a Sunday fun day. We'll play some games. I'm not sure. I might play Path of Exile 2. I might play Baldur's Gate with the new update if I can get it working, get my mods working, because I gotta delete everything, get it working. I might play some Civ. If I get a really active chat with a lot of questions, I'll probably end up playing Civ. If there's not a lot of you guys here, we'll probably play Baldur's Gate. And if there's some there in between, I might end up playing Path of Exile because I can do a little of both. But Civ is something I can just take breaks on. But that's probably what I'll be playing. I love you guys. I love the emotes. It was a fun night. It was a fun debate. I'll see you guys soon. Deuces.